My lungs were burning. It felt like I had swallowed a handful of crushed glass. Every breath was a ragged, desperate gasp that echoed too loudly in the narrow stone corridor. Thud, thud, thud. The heavy, rhythmic footsteps behind me were not rushing. They were deliberate, predatory, like a hunter walking down a wounded animal that has nowhere left to run. "Elena, you ungrateful little bitch, get back here." Marcus's voice boomed off the cold, damp walls of the wine cellar. It wasn't the polished, charismatic baritone the world heard on CNN interviews. This was the voice of a monster, distorted by rage and expensive scotch. I stumbled, my bare shoulder slamming into the rough brickwork. A sharp cry escaped my lips, but I bit it back instantly. "Don't let him hear your pain. He feeds on it." My left ankle throbbed with a sickening, rhythmic pulse. I had twisted it when I pried the rusted shackle off the wall, but adrenaline was currently the only thing keeping me upright. I had to get to the ground floor. I had to get to the biometric lock before he overrode the system. "You think you can leave?" Marcus laughed. A hollow, terrifying sound. "You think you exist outside of this house? You're nothing. Elena, I made you. I own every thought in that pretty little head of yours." I gripped the cold metal railing of the spiral staircase. My hands were shaking, slick with sweat and something warmer. I glanced down at my right hand, the silver drafting compass, my wedding gift from him. The tool I used to design his empire was clutched so tightly in my fist that the metal dug into my palm. The sharp tip was stained crimson. 10 minutes ago, just 10 minutes ago, he had stormed into the studio, my prison cell disguised as a workspace. He had thrown my blueprints for the new Dubai skyline project into my face. "It lacks soul. Elena, fix it by morning, or you don't eat for another 2 days." That was the breaking point. Not the hunger, not the bruises hidden under my long sleeves. It was the audacity. He was going to put his name on my soul again. I had snapped. When he reached out to grab my hair, I drove the compass into his forearm. The memory of his scream gave me a surge of vicious energy. I hauled myself up the stairs, ignoring the agony in my ankle. "Beep, beep, beep!" The keypad at the top of the stairs. My fingers hovered over it. Please, let my clearance still work. Please let him be too arrogant to delete my biometrics. Access granted. The heavy steel door hissed open. I stumbled into the grand hallway of the cliff, the mansion I had designed. The irony tasted like bile. I had built this place to be a sanctuary, and it had become my tomb. The floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the Atlantic Ocean, pitch black and raging under a storm. "Got you." A hand, strong as a vice, clamped onto my hair. My head was yanked back with such force that I saw stars. I screamed, thrashing wildly. Marcus spun me around. His face was a mask of contorted fury. His white dress shirt was ruined, the sleeves soaked in blood where I had stabbed him. In his other hand, he held a 9-iron golf club. "You really thought you could outrun me in my own house," he sneered, his spit hitting my cheek. "You need a lesson. Elena, a permanent one." He raised the club. I didn't think. I reacted. It was pure survival instinct. I dropped my weight, dragging him down with me, and swung my elbow backward into his ribs. He grunted, his grip loosening just a fraction. I scrambled away, crawling over the Persian rug, grabbing the first thing my hand touched, a heavy crystal decanter of aged whiskey sitting on the console table. As Marcus lunged at me, I swung the decanter with both hands. Crash! The crystal shattered against his shoulder, drenching him in high-proof alcohol. He howled, staggering back, clutching his arm. The alcohol splashed onto the lit fireplace behind him. Whoosh! It happened in a heartbeat. The flames from the hearth roared, leaping out to feast on the spilled liquor. The fire caught the edge of the curtains. The room was instantly bathed in a terrifying, flickering orange glow. "You crazy lunatic," Marcus shrieked, batting at the sparks on his sleeve. The fire alarm began to wail a piercing, ear-splitting shriek that drilled into my skull. This was it. The chaos was my cover. I didn't run for the front door. The security gates would be locked down. I ran for the balcony. I threw the glass doors open. The wind hit me like a physical blow, carrying the freezing spray of the ocean. The cliff lived up to its name. Below the marble railing, there was 100-foot drop into the churning, rocky waters of the Atlantic. I climbed onto the railing. My dress whipped violently around my legs. The cold was biting, numbing my skin instantly, but it felt like freedom. Elena. Marcus stood at the broken glass doors, silhouetted by the growing fire behind him. He looked like a demon emerging from hell. He didn't step closer. He knew the drop. He knew the odds. "Get down," he commanded, his voice straining over the wind and the alarm. "Don't be dramatic. You'll die if you jump. You can't survive out there. You're weak." I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in 3 years without fear. I saw the fear in his eyes. Not for me, but for his property, for his secret ghostwriter. "You're right, Marcus," I shouted, my voice snatched away by the gale. "Elena Cross is weak." I let go of the railing. Turning my back to the safety of the cage he called a home. "But I'd rather be a corpse in the ocean than a queen in your hell." "No." I leaned back. Gravity took over. The world flipped. The fire and the monster vanished upward. The rushing wind roared in my ears, louder than any scream. Then, the impact. The freezing darkness swallowed me whole. 3 years later, New York City. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel smelled of expensive perfume, truffle oil, and hypocrisy. I stood in the shadows near a massive marble pillar, clutching a flute of champagne I had no intention of drinking. The lights were dim, focusing all attention on the stage where a spotlight bathed a man in a golden halo. He hadn't aged a day. If anything, he looked better. Marcus Sterling stood at the podium, his tuxedo tailored to perfection, holding the crystalline Architect of the Decade trophy. His smile was practiced, humble, charming, the same smile he used to give me before locking the basement door. "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice thick with fabricated emotion. He paused, looking down at the podium as if gathering his strength. The audience leaned in. They loved a vulnerable billionaire. "This award, it belongs to my late wife, Elena. She was my muse, my inspiration. Tragically, we lost her to mental illness 3 years ago. She fell from the balcony of our home." He wiped a non-existent tear from his eye. A collective sigh of sympathy rippled through the room. "I built the Skylark Tower in her memory," Marcus continued, lifting the trophy. "Every curve, every line of that building represents her spirit." I felt a hand slide around my waist, warm, firm, reassuring. "He's good," Julian whispered in my ear. His voice was a low rumble that settled my nerves. I almost believed him myself. And I know for a fact he hired a ghost team to fix the structural issues of that tower last week. I leaned back against Julian's chest, allowing myself a moment of weakness. The Skylark design was mine. Julian. I drew it on a napkin 3 days before I jumped. He kept it. "He kept the drawing," Julian corrected, his lips brushing my temple. "But he lost the architect. Are you ready?" "Alice." Alice Stone. That was my name now. Elena Cross had drowned in the Atlantic. Her body was never found, washed away by the tide. But a woman had washed up on a fishing boat miles down the coast. Broken, hypothermic, but alive. A woman who had spent 3 years in London, rebuilding her face, her identity, and her fortune with the help of the man standing behind her. I adjusted my dark glasses. My face was different now, sharper, colder. My hair was cut into a sleek, asymmetrical bob, dyed a platinum blonde that caught the light like a blade. "I've been ready for 3 years," I whispered. On stage, Marcus was finishing his speech. "And so, I dedicate this night to moving forward, to new beginnings." As the applause erupted thunderous. Adoring, I stepped out of the shadows. My heels clicked rhythmically on the polished floor, a sound that cut through the clapping like a metronome. I walked straight toward the VIP table where a woman in a red dress sat, clapping the loudest. Chloe, my former assistant, the woman who used to bring me stale bread in the basement. Now, she wore a diamond ring the size of a quail egg on her finger. Marcus's fiancée. I stopped right in front of her. The applause began to die down as people noticed the woman in black blocking the view of the fiancé. Chloe looked up, annoyed. "Excuse me, you're blocking the view." I lowered my sunglasses slowly, letting them rest on the bridge of my nose. I stared directly into her eyes. My eyes hadn't changed. They were the one thing plastic surgery couldn't touch. A distinct, heterochromatic mix, one blue, one flecked with gold. Chloe's breath hitched. Her clapping hands froze in midair. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Congratulations on the engagement," I said. My voice was different, too lower, wrapped in a polished British accent that I had practiced until my tongue bled. "I hear the Sterling mansion is drafty this time of year." Chloe dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the nearby tables. Marcus, just stepping off the stage, froze. He looked up. He saw the back of a blonde woman standing over his fiancée. He saw the shattered glass. He didn't know who I was. Not yet. But he felt it. I could see the hair on the back of his neck standing up, the instinct of the prey sensing the predator. I turned slowly to face him. I didn't smile. I didn't glare. I just looked at him with the cold indifference of a coroner examining a corpse. "Mr. Sterling," I said, loud enough for the nearby donors to hear. "I'm Alice Stone. I represent the Olympus Group from London. We just bought the debt on your Skylark Tower." Marcus blinked, his charming mask slipping for a fraction of a second. "Excuse me, we aren't selling." "You aren't." I agreed, taking a step closer, invading his personal space. I smelled his cologne. It was the same one he wore the night I jumped. It made my stomach turn, but I converted that nausea into fuel. "But according to the contract you signed with the bank that we now own, you are in default." I extended a hand. He stared at it. "Nice to meet you, Marcus. I'm afraid I'm going to be seeing a lot of you." He hesitated, then took my hand. His palm was sweaty. I leaned in, just a fraction, and dropped my voice so only he could hear. It was a risk, but I needed to plant the seed of terror tonight. "By the way," I whispered, dropping the British accent for just 1 second, reverting to the terrified whisper of his wife, "You forgot to turn off the basement light." I pulled back instantly, flashing a dazzling professional smile before he could process the shock. Marcus went pale, deathly pale. He snatched his hand back as if he had been burned. He stared at me, his eyes wide, searching my face for a ghost. But all he saw was Alice Stone, the billionaire investor. "Are you all right, Mr. Sterling?" I asked loudly, my British accent firmly back in place. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Julian stepped up beside me, placing a possessive hand on my lower back. "Darling, don't tease the man. It's a big night for him." Julian looked at Marcus with a shark-like grin. "Julian Thorne, CEO of Thorne Security. Alice is my partner, in every sense." Marcus looked between us, his chest heaving. He was trying to rationalize it. "It can't be. She's dead. I saw her fall." I turned to walk away, leaving him standing in the shards of Chloe's broken glass. "See you soon, Marcus," I called back over my shoulder. The game had officially begun, and this time, I wasn't the one in chains. The ice in Marcus's whiskey glass clinked against the crystal rim, a frantic, high-pitched rhythm that matched the trembling of his hand. I wasn't there to see it, but I could imagine it perfectly. I knew his tells. I knew that when Marcus Sterling was afraid, he didn't scream. He drank. And then he destroyed things. Back in the safety of Julian's penthouse, watching the city lights of Manhattan bleed into the rainy night. I felt a strange, cold hollowness. The adrenaline from the Plaza Hotel was fading, replaced by the crushing reality of what I had just done. I had just poked a sleeping tiger. No, not a tiger, a hyena, a scavenger that thought it was a king. "He's running a background check on you right now," Julian said, walking into the living room. He placed a tablet on the coffee table. The screen displayed a loading bar, hacking into the private server of the investigative firm Marcus used. "Standard procedure. He's scared. Elena, you rattled him." "Alice," I corrected him, not looking away from the window. "Elena is dead. If I forget that for even a second, he kills me for real this time." Julian moved behind me, his hands resting gently on my shoulders. His touch was grounding, the complete opposite of Marcus's possessive grip. "The dossier is watertight. Alice Stone, born in Kensington, masters from the Bartlett School of Architecture, a recluse who made her fortune flipping historical estates in Eastern Europe. There are paper trails, school records, even fake dental records. He won't find a single crack." "He won't trust the paper," I whispered. "He trusts his gut, and his gut is telling him that his dead wife just whispered a secret that only she knew." The basement light. It was such a small thing, a trivial domestic detail, but in that house, in that dungeon he called a wine cellar. Light was the only currency that mattered. When he was angry, he turned it off. When he wanted me to work faster, he strobed it. It was our secret language of torture. By using it, I hadn't just scared him, I had violated the sanctuary of his own cruelty. "The phone is going to ring," I said, turning to face the room. "He won't run away. He's too arrogant. He'll want to bring me closer. He needs to look me in the eye again to convince himself I'm not her." As if on cue, my personal phone, the encrypted line listed on Alice Stone's business card, began to buzz. I looked at Julian. He nodded. I picked it up. Alice Stone speaking. "Ms. Stone." A voice purred on the other end. It wasn't Marcus. It was Chloe. Her voice was dripping with forced sweetness, barely concealing the venom underneath. "This is Chloe, Mr. Sterling's fiancée. We met, briefly, at the gala." "Ah, the woman with the slippery hands," I said, my British accent crisp and unbothered. "I trust you didn't cut yourself on the cheap glass." There was a pause. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. "Mr. Sterling was very impressed by your boldness tonight, and your portfolio. It just so happens we are looking to do some extensive renovations on our estate in the Hamptons, the Cliff. We'd like you to come for a consultation, tomorrow morning." It was a trap, a blatant, clumsy trap. He wanted me on his turf, isolated, away from the cameras of the Plaza Hotel. "I'm afraid I'm fully booked," I lied smoothly. "My schedule is quite tight." "Double your consultation fee." Marcus's voice suddenly cut in. He must have been listening on speaker. "And we'll send a helicopter, 9 a.m. Don't be late." The line went dead. I lowered the phone. My hand wasn't shaking. It was steady as a rock. He took the bait. The helicopter ride to the Hamptons was a blur of gray ocean and white foam. As the coastline appeared, my stomach twisted into a knot of pure, visceral nausea. There it was, the cliff. It stood like a scar on the landscape. A massive, brutalist structure of concrete and glass perched precariously on the edge of the jagged rocks. I remembered drawing the initial sketches for it on the back of a napkin in a cafe in Paris, when I still thought Marcus was a romantic genius, not a thief. I had designed it to embrace the light. He had built it to trap the darkness. "You don't have to go in alone," Julian said through the headset. He was piloting the chopper. "I can land. Walk in with you." "No," I said, my voice hard. "If I bring a shield, he'll think I'm weak. Alice Stone doesn't need a bodyguard. She needs a victim." We landed on the private helipad. The wind was whipping off the ocean. Just like that night, the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below was a roar that lived in my nightmares. "Don't look down. Don't look at the balcony. I stepped out, the wind tearing at my white trench coat. I wore sunglasses. Not for the sun, there was none, but to hide the involuntary flinch of my eyes as I looked at the front door. Marcus and Chloe were waiting. Marcus looked terrible. He was wearing casual clothes, a cashmere sweater and slacks, but his eyes were bloodshot, and there was a nervous energy in the way he kept clenching and unclenching his jaw. He was studying my walk. I made sure to stride with purpose, my chin high, my steps heavy and audible. Elena used to scurry. Alice marched. "Ms. Stone," Marcus said, not offering his hand this time. "Welcome to the cliff." "Mr. Sterling?" I nodded. Removing my sunglasses slowly, I held his gaze. "Impressive location. Shame about the architecture. It feels suffocating." Marcus twitched. "It won an award." "Awards are bought. Mr. Sterling, taste is inherent." I swept past him, walking straight into the house without waiting for an invitation. The smell hit me first. Sandalwood and old money. The foyer was exactly as I had left it. The grand staircase where he had dragged me by my hair. The spot on the rug where I had shattered the whiskey decanter. It had been replaced, of course. But the ghost of the stain remained in my mind. "We want to open up the space," Chloe chirped, trotting after me like a yapping dog. She linked her arm through Marcus's, marking her territory. "More light, more pink marble in the foyer, something romantic." I stopped dead in the center of the hallway and turned to her. I looked at her shoes, tacky, seasonal designer knockoffs, and then up to her face. "Pink marble," I repeated, letting a dry chuckle escape my lips. "This is a cliffside estate, darling, not a Las Vegas brothel. You don't fight the ocean with pink marble. You fight it with slate and steel." Chloe's face turned crimson. "Excuse me, I am the lady of this house." "Then act like one," I snapped, "and stop interrupting the professionals." I turned my back on her, focusing on Marcus. He wasn't defending her. He was staring at me, fascinated. He loved cruelty. He respected it. My insult to Chloe had actually made him like me more. "The structure is sound," Marcus said, his voice low, "but it feels haunted. I want to gut the East Wing. Completely." The East Wing, that was where our bedroom used to be, where he used to wake me up at 3 a.m. to critique my drawings. "Show me," I commanded. We walked through the house. Every step was a battle against memory. Here is where he slapped me for burning the roast. Here is where he threw my laptop out the window. But I forced my brain to switch into architect mode. I touched the walls, not as a victim, but as a doctor examining a tumor. "The load-bearing walls here are inefficient," I critiqued, tapping a column. "And the lighting? Who designed this lighting? It creates shadows everywhere. It's perfect for a horror movie, terrible for a home." "My late wife designed the lighting," Marcus said softly, watching my reaction. This was the test. I didn't flinch. I let out a bored sigh. "Well, that explains it. Amateurs often mistake moodiness for depth. We'll rip it all out." Marcus exhaled. The tension in his shoulders dropped an inch. If I were Elena, I would have defended my work. By trashing my own creation, I was proving I was someone else. "We can discuss the contract in the study," Marcus said, gesturing towards the heavy oak doors at the end of the hall. The study, the only room in the house I was never allowed to enter. It was where he kept his safe, his secrets. I walked in. It was dark, smelling of leather and cigar smoke. I took the seat opposite his massive desk, the power seat. "I've prepared a standard agreement," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the mahogany surface. I didn't even open it. I slid it back. "I don't sign standard agreements, Mr. Sterling. I have my own terms." I pulled a sleek black document from my briefcase and placed it on the table. "Three conditions," I said, holding up 3 fingers. "First, total creative control. You don't question my materials, my team, or my timeline. If Chloe here wants pink marble, she can install it in her dollhouse." Chloe gasped from the doorway, but Marcus silenced her with a hand gesture. "Go on." Second, a tiered payment structure, 50% upfront, the rest upon completion, but the upfront payment is non-refundable if you breach the contract. Steep, Marcus noted, eyes narrowing. And the third? I leaned forward, my voice dropping to that cold, clinical tone again. Third, privacy. My team works in a sterile environment. No cameras, no surveillance in the work zones. I protect my intellectual property aggressively. If I see a single lens pointed at my blueprints, I walk, and I keep your money. Marcus laughed. It was a dry barking sound. No cameras. In my own house, I have a security system worth millions. Then turn it off in the East Wing, I said flatly. Or find another architect, perhaps one who likes pink marble. I stood up, pretending to pack my things. It seems we aren't a match, Mr. Sterling. A pity. I had some ideas for structural reinforcements. I started walking to the door. 1 step, 2 steps. Call me back. You greedy bastard. Call me back. I knew his weakness. He was paranoid about corporate espionage. If he thought I was protecting trade secrets, he would respect it. But more than that, he wanted to see what I would do. He wanted to solve the puzzle of Alice Stone. He couldn't solve it if I left. Wait. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob. I counted to 3 before turning around. I can disable the cameras in the East Wing, Marcus said, licking his lips. But I will have my head of security inspect your team daily. Acceptable, I said, as long as they don't touch my drawings. I walked back to the desk, uncapped a fountain pen, a heavy, expensive Mont Blanc, and signed the document with a flourish. Alice Stone. The signature was sharp, jagged, nothing like Elena's looping cursive. I pushed the paper toward him. Marcus hesitated. He looked at me, his eyes searching for the frightened girl he had murdered. Why did you take this job, Ms. Stone? He asked quietly. You don't need the money. You clearly despise my fiancé. Why come here? I capped the pen with a loud click. Because, Marcus, I said, using his first name for the first time without a title. I love a challenge. And this house, it feels like it's dying. I want to be the one to bury it. Or bury you in it. The words hung unspoken in the air. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, a mix of arousal and fear in his eyes. He picked up the pen. Welcome to the team, Alice. He signed. The trap was set. He had just legally granted me access to the veins and arteries of his home. He had given me permission to blind his electronic eyes. As I walked out of the study, passing a fuming Chloe, I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was the override code for the gate, sent to my phone as part of the contractor access package. I stepped out into the wind. Walking toward the waiting helicopter, Julian was watching me from the cockpit. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't need to. I could feel its weight on my spine. But as I climbed into the chopper, I let myself smile, a cold, predatory smile. Did he sign? Julian asked as I buckled in. He signed, I replied, looking down at the receding mansion as we lifted off. He thinks he hired an architect, Julian. And what did he hire? I watched the cliff disappear into the gray mist. He hired his executioner. The game was no longer about hiding. It was about hunting. And I knew exactly where to start digging. I pulled out my tablet. The schematics of the cliff appeared on the screen. I zoomed in on the library wall, behind the mahogany bookshelf. There was a hollow space. A space I had discovered 3 years ago when I was chasing a rat. A space that led directly to the central wiring of the smart home system. Julian, I said over the headset, get me the infrasound emitters, the industrial ones. The frequency that causes hallucinations, Julian asked, his voice tinged with concern. The ghost frequency, I corrected. If Marcus wants to believe in ghosts, let's give him a haunting he'll never forget. The sound of a sledgehammer smashing through drywall is surprisingly similar to the sound of a bone snapping. It's a dull, heavy thud followed by the crumbling of structure. For the last 3 hours, that sound had been the symphony of my revenge. Tear it down, I ordered, my voice cutting through the cloud of plaster dust choking the East Wing hallway. I want this entire partition gone by lunch. It obstructs the flow. The construction crew. A team of burly men handpicked by Julian for their discretion and lack of curiosity, swung their hammers with rhythmic brutality. To them, it was just a renovation job. To me, it was surgery. I wasn't just removing walls. I was cutting out the cancer of my past. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. He had retreated to his study in the West Wing, unable to bear the noise of his masterpiece being disemboweled. Chloe was likely at the spa, fleeing the dust that might ruin her pores. Perfect. Keep working, I told the foreman, checking my watch. I need to inspect the wiring in the library. Do not disturb me. I slipped away from the chaos, my heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor as I crossed the threshold into the silent part of the house. The library was exactly as I remembered it, floor-to-ceiling mahogany bookshelves. The smell of old paper and pretension. This was where Marcus liked to play the intellectual, sipping scotch and quoting books he had never read. I walked straight to the history section. Shelf 3, row 4. The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. How fitting. I pulled the book. There was no secret lever, nothing so cliché. Instead, I reached behind the book, finding the small knot in the wood paneling that I had discovered 5 years ago while chasing a terrified mouse. I pressed it hard. Click! A section of the heavy shelving popped forward just an inch. It wasn't a secret room. Marcus wasn't clever enough for that. It was a service chase. A narrow crawl space meant for electrical maintenance that ran behind the walls of the entire house. I slipped my hand into my jacket pocket and pulled out the device Julian had given me. It looked like a simple black speaker, no larger than a deck of cards. But inside, it was a piece of military-grade acoustic weaponry. The infrasound emitter. Julian had explained the science with a grim smile. 19 hertz. Elena, it's just below the range of human hearing. You can't hear it, but your body feels it. It resonates with the fluid in your eyeballs, causing hallucinations. It vibrates your ribcage, inducing a primal fight-or-flight panic. It is the frequency of ghosts. I squeezed into the dusty gap behind the shelf. It smelled of dry rot and neglect. I attached the device to the main support beam that ran directly behind the wall of Marcus's study. The wood would act as a conductor, amplifying the vibration and turning the entire wall into a silent speaker. I pulled out my phone and opened the control app. I tapped the button labeled Activate. A tiny red light on the device blinked once. I didn't hear anything. The room was dead silent. But then, I felt it. A subtle pressure in my ears. A slight unease settling in the pit of my stomach, like the drop of a roller coaster before it plunges. I smiled in the dark. Enjoy the ride, Marcus. I pushed the bookshelf back into place just as the heavy oak door of the library creaked open. I spun around, grabbing a random book from the table and pretending to read. Ms. Stone? It was Marcus. He looked frazzled. His hair was slightly disheveled, and there was a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Mr. Sterling, I said, not looking up from the page. I was just admiring your collection. You have a lot of books on ethics for a man in your line of work. Marcus didn't rise to the bait. He rubbed his temples, grimacing. Do you feel that? I looked up, feigning innocence. Feel what? That pressure, he muttered, looking around the room with suspicion. The air feels heavy, and there's a humming sound. Can't you hear it? The frequency was working. It was already vibrating the delicate bones of his inner ear. I hear nothing but the construction crew. Marcus, I said, snapping the book shut. Perhaps you're stressed. Guilt can be heavy. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. What did you say? The renovation, I corrected smoothly, walking past him. It's a stressful process. Living in a construction zone can play tricks on the mind. I stopped right next to him. I was close enough to see the pupils of his eyes dilating, fighting to focus. The vibration was affecting his vision. You should rest, Marcus, I whispered, my voice blending with the silent hum. The nights are long here. By 10:00 p.m., the crew had left. The house settled into an oppressive silence, The storm outside had died down to a dull, rhythmic rain against the glass. But inside, the tension was thick enough to choke on. I sat in the guest suite of the East Wing, watching the monitor on my laptop. Julian had hacked the baby monitor system Chloe had installed for her dog. The camera feed showed the living room where Marcus was trying to work. He was pacing, up and down, up and down. Every few seconds, he would stop and look over his shoulder, as if someone had whispered his name. On the screen, I saw him rub his chest. The 19 Hz frequency was resonating in his lungs, mimicking the sensation of a panic attack. Suddenly, Marcus grabbed a vase from the mantelpiece and hurled it at the wall. Smash! I closed my laptop and walked out into the hallway. Time for Act 2. I found him in the corridor outside the study. He was shouting at Chloe, who was standing there in a silk robe, looking terrified and confused. I told you to stop scratching, Marcus yelled, his face purple with rage. Stop it, it's driving me insane. I wasn't scratching anything, Marcus, Chloe cried, backing away. I was in the bath. What is wrong with you? There is something in the walls, Marcus roared, pointing a trembling finger at the paneling right where I had installed the emitter. Can't you hear it? It sounds like nails, like someone digging their way out. I stepped out of the shadows. Is everything all right? They both jumped. Marcus spun around, his eyes wild. For a second, he looked at me and didn't see Alice Stone. He saw a ghost. He blinked rapidly, rubbing his eyes. You, he breathed. Do you hear it now, the scratching? I tilted my head, listening intently to the silence. I hear the wind, Marcus, and I hear a very frightened man yelling at his fiancée. It's not the wind, Marcus hissed. He pressed his ear against the wall. It's in here. It's rats. It has to be rats, thousands of them. Thousands. He looked at me, desperate for validation. You're the architect. Tell me there are rats in the crawl space. It is possible, I said coolly. Old houses have infestations. Memories rot. Things crawl in to die. I walked closer to the wall. I placed my hand on the wood, right over the hidden device. I could feel the microscopic vibration under my palm. But sometimes, Marcus, I said, turning to look him dead in the eye. Sounds are just manifestations of the mind. Are you sleeping well? I sleep fine, he snapped, though the dark circles under his eyes told a different story. Good, because sleep deprivation can cause auditory hallucinations. I turned to Chloe. Make him some herbal tea. Darling, he looks like he's about to have a stroke. Chloe scrambled away toward the kitchen, eager to escape his wrath. Marcus was left alone with me. The infrasound was peaking now. I could see a small tick developing under his left eye. Why are you doing this? He whispered, his voice trembling. Doing what? Looking at me like that, like you know something. I took a step closer. The hallway was dim. I know that this house was built on a cliff. Marcus, stability is an illusion here. One wrong move and the foundation crumbles. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, a sketch of the Skylark Tower, but not the finished version. It was the very first draft, the one with the coffee stain on the corner where I had spilled my espresso 3 years ago, the one I had hidden in the History of Rome book before I died. I found this in the library. I lied, holding it out. It fell out of a book. It looks like an original sketch, but the signature is odd. Marcus snatched the paper from my hand. He stared at it. His breath hitched. He saw the coffee stain. He knew that stain. He had screamed at me for ruining the paper that night. Where did you find this? He choked out. I told you, the library. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was screaming. But the strange thing is, Marcus, the ink is still wet. It wasn't. Of course. But in his state with his eyes vibrating, his chest tight, and his brain flooded with fear hormones, suggestion was more powerful than reality. Marcus rubbed his thumb over the ink. He looked at his finger. He hallucinated a smudge of blue. No, he gasped, dropping the paper as if it were burning. That's impossible. She's dead. Who is dead? I asked softly. Elena, he shouted, backing away until he hit the wall. Elena is dead. I saw her fall. Then who is signing her drawings in your library? Marcus. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned on my heel and walked back toward my room, leaving him hyperventilating in the hallway, staring at a piece of paper that shouldn't exist. As I closed my bedroom door, I heard a sound that was music to my ears. The sound of Marcus Sterling ripping the wallpaper off the wall with his bare hands, frantically searching for the source of the scratching that was only in his head. I picked up my phone and texted Julian. Phase 1 complete. The rat is in the trap. The sound of a circular saw biting into expensive mahogany is a distinct, agonizing screech. It woke me up at 7:00 a.m., vibrating through the floorboards of the guest suite. I didn't roll over. I didn't groan. I sat up instantly, sliding my feet into my silk slippers. I grabbed my phone, checked the app connected to the infrasound emitter, and tapped pause. The silent hum that had been vibrating the house's skeleton for the last 12 hours vanished. Showtime, I whispered to the empty room. I threw on a black power suit, sharp shoulders, cinched waist, and walked down the hallway toward the source of the noise. The air in the corridor was thick with tension and drywall dust. I found Marcus in the library. He looked like a man who had gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight boxer and lost every single one. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark, bruised circles. His hair was standing up in tufts where he had run his hands through it repeatedly. He was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, now wrinkled and stained with sweat. Standing next to him was a stranger, a man in dirty coveralls holding a reciprocating saw. They had just cut a 2-foot hole in the beautiful oak paneling I had supposedly come here to protect. Stop, I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it had the whip-crack authority of a site manager. The man with the saw froze. Marcus spun around, his eyes wild and unfocused. There's something in there, Marcus shouted, pointing at the gaping hole. I heard it all night, Alice scratching humming. It's behind the support beam. I walked over, stepping delicately over the debris. I looked into the dark hole. It was empty, just insulation and wires, because I had installed the device 6 feet higher than where he was looking, and I had turned it off the moment I woke up. Mr. Sterling, I said, my tone dripping with disappointed professionalism. Do you realize you just violated Section 4, Paragraph 2 of our contract? To hell with the contract, Marcus spat, grabbing a flashlight and shining it frantically into the void. There are rats or bugs or something. I turned to the contractor. You, pack up. If you cut 1 more inch of this historic paneling without my written authorization, I will sue your company for destruction of property and structural negligence. I have the best lawyers in London on speed dial. The man looked at me, then at the crazy billionaire with the flashlight, and made a smart decision. He unplugged his saw. I'm out, guy's crazy anyway. There ain't nothing in there, lady. Get out, Marcus snarled at him. When we were alone, Marcus dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, the beam dancing crazily on the ceiling. He slumped into a leather armchair, burying his face in his hands. It stopped, he whispered. The moment you walked in, the noise stopped. I stood over him. Because there was no noise. Marcus, it's stress. It's the pressure of the merger, the wedding, the renovation. You are projecting your anxiety onto the architecture. He looked up at me, vulnerable. I swear, I heard it. It felt like the house was breathing. Houses don't breathe, Marcus. They just endure. I leaned down, bringing my face close to his. You need to pull yourself together. The board members are coming for a site visit on Friday. If they see you tearing apart your own walls looking for imaginary rats, the stock price won't just dip, it will flatline. He flinched. The mention of money always sobered him up. You're right, he muttered, straightening his tie with trembling fingers. You're right, I need a drink. You need a shower, I corrected. And sleep. Where's your fiancée? She should be taking care of you. Marcus's face darkened. Chloe. She's locked herself in the master suite, said she has a migraine. Useless. Typical. I scoffed, planting the seed of resentment. When the ship rocks, the rats hide. A real partner stands on the deck. I turned and walked away. Step 1. Gatekeep the sanity. I had successfully made him doubt his own senses and rely on my rationality. Now for step 2. Gaslight the girl. I went to the temporary command center I had set up in the sunroom. I pulled up the smart home schematics on my tablet. Chloe was indeed in the master suite. The sensors showed she was in the bathroom. The water was running. I tapped into the water heater controls. It was a sophisticated Japanese system, digital and precise, currently set to a comfortable 102 degrees Fahrenheit. I watched the temperature gauge. Let's turn up the heat, I murmured. I typed in a new command, target temp 125 degrees, ramp up speed immediate. It wasn't enough to burn her severely. I didn't want the police involved for assault. I just wanted pain, shock, and chaos. I waited. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. Scream. It was a high-pitched, piercing shriek that echoed down the hallway. I closed the app instantly and ran toward the master suite. Not too fast, Alice Stone wouldn't run, but fast enough to be a witness. I found Marcus already there, banging on the locked bathroom door. "Chloe, what the hell is going on?" he shouted, more annoyed than concerned. The door flew open. Chloe stumbled out, wrapped in a towel, her skin lobster red. She was sobbing, clutching her shoulder. "It burned me," she screamed, pointing accusingly at the shower. "The water, it turned into lava. Someone tried to boil me alive." She looked at me, her eyes narrowed. You did this." Marcus looked at me, then back at Chloe. "Don't be ridiculous. Alice was in the library with me." "She controls the house," Chloe shrieked, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. "She's a witch. First the rats, now this. She's hacking the system." "Mrs. Sterling to be," I said calmly. Stepping into the bathroom, steam was billowing out like a sauna. "Let's look at the logs, shall we?" "This is a smart system. It records every manual input." I walked to the digital control panel mounted on the wall. I had already spoofed the logs remotely before I even left the sunroom. I tapped the screen and beckoned Marcus over. "Look," I said, pointing at the timestamp. "At 7:15 a.m., a manual override was entered from this panel. Target temperature set to maximum." Marcus squinted at the screen. 7:15? Chloe, you were the only one in here at 7:15. Chloe's jaw dropped. "What? No, I didn't touch it. I set it to warm." "The machine doesn't lie, Chloe," I said, my voice dripping with pity. "Perhaps in your migraine-induced state, you confused the dials. Or maybe—" I let the sentence trail off, glancing significantly at Marcus. "Maybe what?" Marcus snapped. "Maybe it's a cry for help," I suggested softly. "The stress of the wedding. Some women subconsciously hurt themselves to get attention from their busy husbands." "That's insanity!" Chloe yelled, lunging at me. "You liar! You changed it!" Marcus stepped in between us, shoving Chloe back. "Enough." "Marcus, she's framing me," Chloe wailed. "Stop it!" Marcus roared, his patience snapping. "I am dealing with a haunted house, a falling stock price, and a lunatic contractor. And now you're scalding yourself to get me to look at you. You're pathetic, Chloe." "Pathetic," Chloe whispered, her face crumbling. "I'm the victim here." "You're a liability," Marcus sneered. "Go put some aloe on that and shut up. I have work to do." He stormed out of the room. Chloe slid down the wall, weeping into her hands. I stood there for a moment, watching her. This was the woman who had laughed when Marcus threw my sketchbook into the fireplace 3 years ago. "You should be careful with the technology, darling," I said, leaning down to whisper in her ear. "It's very sensitive, like you." I walked out, leaving her alone on the cold tile floor. 2 hours later, the house was quiet again. Marcus had locked himself in his study with a bottle of scotch. Chloe was hiding in the guest wing. I was in the kitchen, making myself an espresso, when I heard the crash. It came from the master bath again. I put down my cup and walked leisurely toward the sound. Marcus was standing in the doorway of the bathroom. He wasn't moving. He was staring at the mirror. I walked up behind him. The bathroom was still humid from Chloe's incident. The mirror was fogged up with condensation. But in the center of the glass, words had been written, not in lipstick, not in paint. They were written in the steam itself, as if a cold finger had traced them just seconds ago. "I'm still cold." Marcus was trembling so violently that his knees gave way. He slumped against the doorframe, sliding down until he hit the floor. "She's here," he wheezed, his eyes wide and vacant. "Elena, she's here. She's cold." I looked at the mirror. I had used a hydrophobic spray, a chemical that repels water, to write those words on the glass yesterday when I was inspecting the plumbing. They were invisible when dry, but the moment the room filled with steam, the message appeared. Simple chemistry. To Marcus, it was black magic. "Marcus." I crouched down beside him. "What is it?" He pointed a shaking finger at the mirror. "Read it, read it." I looked at the mirror. The steam was already starting to fade, the edges of the letters blurring. "Read what?" I asked, looking confused. "It's just steam, Marcus." "The words," he screamed, grabbing my lapels. "It says I'm still cold, can't you see it?" I gently pried his fingers off my suit. "Marcus, the mirror is blank." He whipped his head back to look. The steam had shifted just enough. The hydrophobic effect was fading as the water droplets coalesced. The message was gone. "It was there," he sobbed, curling into a ball. "She's cold. She's in the ocean. She wants to take me with her." I stood up, towering over him. "There is nothing there. Marcus, you are having a breakdown." I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling Dr. Eris." I said, "You need a sedative." "No doctors," he gasped. "If the board finds out—" "Then let me handle it," I said, my voice suddenly commanding. "I will take over the renovation supervision. You need to sleep. Go to the guest house. It's quiet there. No walls to scratch. No mirrors to haunt you." He looked up at me like a drowning man looking at a life raft. He didn't see the shark fins circling. You would do that?" "I protect my clients." I said, "Go now." He scrambled up and ran, fleeing his own bedroom like a terrified child. I watched him go. Then I turned back to the mirror. The last traces of the letters were vanishing. I pulled a handkerchief from my pocket and wiped the glass clean. I looked at my reflection. Alice Stone stared back, cold, sharp, alive. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. "Logistics for the accident are ready. Phase 3. I typed back one word. "Execute." Marcus Sterling was no longer the master of the house. He was a refugee in his own garden. And now that he was out of the main building, I had full access to the one thing he protected more than his life: his server room. It was time to bankrupt him. The mansion was finally silent. It wasn't the peaceful silence of a home at rest. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a crime scene waiting to be discovered. I stood in the hallway of the West Wing, watching the rain lash against the bulletproof glass. The guest house, where Marcus was currently hiding under a duvet and a haze of sedatives, was a dark shape in the distance. He was out of the game for tonight. "The perimeter is clear," Julian's voice crackled in my earpiece. "I've looped the security feed in the main corridor. You have 20 minutes before the system resets its encryption key. If you're not out by then, you'll be locked in." 20 minutes is an eternity," I whispered, turning toward the heavy steel door at the end of the hall. This wasn't a room listed on the blueprints, on the official schematics submitted to the city. This was a panic room, in reality. It was Marcus's brain, the server room, the place where he kept the digital skeletons that couldn't be buried in the ground. I approached the keypad. It was a biometric scanner, retina and fingerprint, military grade, unhackable by brute force. Luckily, I hadn't come to hack it, I had come to trick it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, high-resolution transparency film. Yesterday, when Marcus had signed the contract with my Mont Blanc pen. I hadn't just been being professional. The barrel of that pen was coated in a reactive polymer. It had captured a perfect, 3D printable map of his thumbprint. I pressed the film against the scanner. Beep! Green light. Step 1 complete, I murmured. Now for the eye. This was the gamble. I held up a high-definition photograph of Marcus I had taken at the Gala with a telephoto lens. Julian had digitally enhanced the iris pattern, adding the necessary depth and reflection to fool the sensor. I held the photo up to the camera. Silence. Then, the heavy thud of pneumatic locks disengaging. The door hissed open. I stepped inside. The air was freezing, kept at a constant 60 degrees to cool the banks of servers humming in the dark. Blue LED lights blinked rhythmically, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. "I'm in," I said. "Connect to the terminal." I pulled a cable from my watch, a custom piece of tech Julian had built, and plugged it directly into the main console. On my watch face, code began to scroll rapidly. Julian was bypassing the firewalls from his penthouse in Manhattan. "I'm looking for the Black Ledger," I said, my eyes scanning the file directory on the main screen. "The offshore accounts, the bribes to the zoning commission, everything." "Found it," Julian said, his voice tight. "Elena, you need to see this, folder 404. I tapped the screen. The folder opened. It wasn't just financial crimes, it was a setup. There were dozens of shell companies, all funneling money out of Sterling Corp into accounts in the Cayman Islands, but the accounts weren't in Marcus's name. They were in Chloe's. "He's liquidating the company," I realized, a cold smile touching my lips. "He's stealing everything, and he's putting the signature on the checks in Chloe's name. When the SEC investigates, Marcus vanishes with the cash," Julian finished. "And Chloe goes to federal prison for embezzlement. 10 to 15 years, minimum." "He really is a romantic," I whispered. I started the download. The progress bar crawled. 10%, 20%, click. The sound was distinct. It wasn't a digital beep. It was the mechanical click of a hammer being pulled back on a revolver. I froze. "Step away from the console." The voice was shaky, but the threat was real. I turned around slowly, raising my hands. Chloe was standing in the doorway. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair wet and matted. In her trembling hand, she held a pearl-handled .38 Special, a lady's gun, that Marcus kept in the nightstand. "I knew it," Chloe spat, her eyes wild with a mixture of pain and triumph. "You're not an architect. You're a corporate spy. You're here to steal his designs." "Put the gun down, Chloe," I said calmly. I didn't look at the gun. I looked at her. "You don't want to do this." "Why not?" She laughed, a brittle, hysterical sound. "I shoot an intruder in the middle of the night. It's self-defense. Marcus will thank me. He'll finally see that I'm loyal." "Loyal," I repeated, letting my hands drop slowly. "You think he values loyalty, Chloe. Look at the screen." "Don't move!" she screamed, the gun wavering. "I don't care what's on the screen." "You should," I said, my voice hardening. "Because that screen explains why you're going to prison next month." Chloe blinked. "What?" "Shoot me," I challenged, taking a step toward her. "Go ahead, pull the trigger. The police will come. They'll find my body. And then they'll find that computer. Do you know what they'll see?" I pointed at the monitor behind me. "They'll see that Chloe Miller has embezzled $50 million from Sterling Corp over the last 6 months." Chloe's face went slack. The gun lowered an inch. That's a lie. I don't have $50 million. "Exactly," I said, stepping closer. "Marcus has the money. You have the paper trail. Why do you think he proposed to you, Chloe? Because he loves you, or because a spouse cannot be forced to testify against their husband, but a scapegoat needs to be close enough to sign the documents?" "No," she whispered. He loves me. We're getting married." "He's leaving," I said brutally. "Look at the transfer dates. The final liquidation is scheduled for Friday, the day of the board meeting. He's going to board a plane to non-extradition territory. And you are going to be left here in handcuffs." Chloe looked at the screen. She saw her name, her social security number, her digital signature attached to millions of dollars in illegal wire transfers. The gun dropped from her hand. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. She fell to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't do it. I just signed what he told me. He said it was for the wedding venue. I walked over to her. I didn't offer comfort. I stood over her like a judge. He played you, Chloe, just like he played his first wife. Chloe looked up, her eyes red and swollen. Elena, he told me she was crazy. He said she jumped because she was unstable. Elena wasn't crazy, I said, my voice low and dangerous. She was inconvenient, just like you are now. I crouched down, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look at me. You have two choices. Option A, you pick up that gun, shoot me, and wait for the FBI to kick down the door and drag you away for life. I paused. Option B, you stop crying, you wipe your face, and you help me destroy him. Chloe stared at me. The fear in her eyes was slowly being replaced by something else. Hate. The pure, unfiltered hatred of a woman scorned. How, she whispered. He controls everything, the security, the money. Not anymore, I said. Standing up and retrieving the USB drive from the console, the download was complete. I have his money. Now I need his confession. He'll never confess, Chloe said, wiping her nose on her sleeve. He's a sociopath. He's a paranoid narcissist who thinks his house is haunted, I corrected. We are going to push him over the edge, Chloe, but I need eyes inside the guest house. I need someone he trusts. He doesn't trust me, she said bitterly. He pushed me away. He needs you, I said. He's scared. Fear makes men crave comfort. You go back to him. You play the dutiful, worried fiancé. You tell him you believe him about the ghosts. You feed his delusion. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, translucent vial. And you put this in his scotch. Chloe stared at the vial. Is it poison? It's a mild hallucinogen, I lied. It was actually a concentrated dose of scopolamine devil's breath mixed with an anxiety inducer. It will make him suggestible. It will make the walls dissolve. Chloe took the vial. Her hand closed around it tightly. Friday, I said. The board meeting. That is when we execute him. Publicly, legally, brutally. What do I get? Chloe asked, her survival instinct kicking back in. If I help you, what do I get? You get to stay out of prison, I said coldly. And if you do exactly what I say, I might leave you enough money to disappear. Chloe nodded. She stood up, smoothing her silk robe. She looked at the gun on the floor, then at me. He burned my shoulder, she said softly. I know. Make him hurt, she said. I intend to. Suddenly, the lights in the server room turned red. A siren began to wail, a low, mechanical drone. Elena, Julian's voice shouted in my ear. Get out! He's overriding the system manually. He's waking up. Go, I hissed at Chloe. Back to your room, you saw nothing. Chloe turned and ran. I grabbed the USB drive and sprinted for the door. I made it out just as the steel bolts slammed shut behind me. I stood in the hallway, breathing hard. The red emergency lights bathed the corridor in the color of blood. I looked at the USB drive in my hand. I had the leverage. I had the pawn. But as I walked back toward my wing, my phone buzzed. An encrypted message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo, taken just now, from the trees outside the guest house. It showed me standing in the server room. And the caption read, Nice try, Elena, but I never sleep. I froze. He knew. Marcus wasn't having a breakdown. Or he was, and the breakdown had made him sharper. I looked out the window toward the dark guest house. A single light flickered on. The game had just changed. He wasn't the prey anymore. We were two predators locked in a cage, and only one of us was walking out alive on Friday. The image on my phone screen was grainy, low light, and absolutely terrifying. It was me, standing in the blue glow of the server room, frozen in time like a digital ghost. The text below it was worse. Nice try, Elena, but I never sleep. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm. He knew. The game of cat and mouse was over. The cat had just locked the door and swallowed the key. Elena? Julian's voice in my earpiece was sharp, panic edging into his usually calm tone. Abort! Get out of there! I'm sending the extraction team. He's watching you right now. No, I whispered, staring at the darkened guest house. The single light in the window blinked out. If I run now, he wins. He'll vanish with the money, and Chloe goes to jail. I lose everything. He knows who you are, Julian argued. He's not going to sue you. Elena, he's going to kill you. He murdered you once. He won't hesitate to do it again. He can't call the police, I reasoned, forcing my breathing to slow. I have the ledger. I have proof he's stealing $50 million. If cops come, we both go down. He needs that drive back. A soft swish sound came from the hallway door. I turned. A creamy white envelope had been slid under the door of my suite. I walked over and picked it up. It was heavy, expensive cardstock. The handwriting was jagged. Aggressive Marcus's hand. Dinner, 800 p.m., the dining room, dressed to kill. I know I will. I stared at the note. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons to the gallows. He wants a meeting, I told Julian. A parley. It's a trap, Julian spat. Of course it's a trap, I said. Walking to the wardrobe, I pulled out a dress I had saved for the victory party, a blood-red silk gown that looked like liquid fire. But traps are only dangerous if you don't know they're there. I texted Chloe a single command, it's tonight, be ready. At 7:59 p.m., I descended the grand staircase. The house was dark, the storm outside providing the only illumination through the massive windows. Lightning flashed, casting long, skeletal shadows across the foyer. The dining room doors were open. Marcus sat at the head of the long mahogany table. The room was illuminated by 100 candles, flickering in the draft. It felt less like a romantic dinner and more like a seance. He wasn't wearing the disheveled clothes of the madman from this morning. He was immaculate in a black tuxedo. His hair was slicked back, his face shaved. The terrified, paranoid victim I had gaslit for 3 days was gone. In his place sat the predator. Chloe stood by the sideboard, dressed not in her usual finery, but in a simple black dress. Acting as the server, her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. She wouldn't look at me. You're right on time, Marcus said, not standing up. His voice was smooth, devoid of the tremor that had been there yesterday. Punctuality. It was always one of your few virtues. Alice. He paused before the name, letting it hang in the air like an insult. Mr. Sterling, I said, gliding to the chair opposite him, the far end of the table. You look remarkably recovered. I thought the ghosts were keeping you up. I realized something, Marcus said, picking up a silver knife and inspecting the blade. Ghosts don't leave fingerprints on biometric scanners, and ghosts don't steal USB drives. I sat down. The distance between us was 10 feet of polished wood, but it felt like a knife fight in a phone booth. I have no idea what you're talking about, I lied, smoothing my napkin. I'm just an architect. Marcus laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Drop it, the accent, the posture. It's exhausting. Isn't it pretending to be someone else? He looked at Chloe. Pour the wine, darling. Chloe moved forward with a crystal decanter. Her hands were shaking so badly the glass clattered against the rim of Marcus's goblet. Careful, Marcus snapped. Grabbing her wrist, he squeezed it hard. I saw her wince. We wouldn't want to spill. This is a 2018 Cabernet, the year my late wife had her accident. He looked at me, his eyes dead and flat. It has a very distinct finish, notes of cherry, oak, and betrayal. Chloe moved to me. She poured the dark red liquid into my glass. As she leaned in, she blocked Marcus's view for a split second. Her eyes met mine, widened, panic. She gave a microscopic shake of her head. Don't drink. My stomach dropped. The plan was for her to drug him. But her reaction told me something had changed. Marcus had gotten to the wine first. Thank you, Chloe, I said, my voice steady. You can go. No, Marcus commanded. Stay, I want a witness. He raised his glass. A toast to the truth. I raised my glass. I watched him. He brought the rim to his lips but didn't tilt his head. He was waiting for me. To the truth, I echoed. I brought the glass to my lips. The smell of the wine masked everything. Was it cyanide arsenic? Or just a paralytic so he could drag me back to the basement? I tipped the glass. The liquid touched my lips. Crash! A massive thunderclap shook the house, and the lights flickered and died. In the pitch blackness, I moved. I didn't drink. I poured the wine into the potted fern behind my chair. It took less than a second. When the emergency lights dim, red, Erie buzzed on a moment later. I was wiping my mouth with a napkin. Delicious, I said. Marcus lowered his glass. He hadn't drunk a drop. He smiled a cruel, satisfied smile. I'm glad you like it. It takes effect in about 3 minutes. What does? I asked, feigning innocence. The neurotoxin, he said casually, cutting into his steak. Odorless, tasteless. It shuts down the respiratory system. You'll feel a little drowsy. Then your lungs will simply stop listening to your brain. Chloe let out a sob from the corner. Marcus, I said, dropping the British accent completely. My voice shifted back to the raw, American cadence of Elena Cross. You really are a one-trick pony. Poison again. It lacks imagination. Marcus froze. The fork halfway to his mouth stopped. There she is, he whispered, his eyes gleaming with sick delight. Hello, Elena. I missed you. I didn't miss you, Marcus. I missed my life, the one you stole. I gave you a purpose. He slammed his hand on the table, the cutlery jumping. You were a nobody, a draftsman with dirty fingernails. I made you a legend. And how did you repay me? You tried to leave. You locked me in a basement, I shouted back, standing up. You stole my mind. You erased my name. And I'm going to erase you again, he snarled. He checked his watch. 1 minute left, feeling short of breath yet. I stood there, looking at him. I took a deep breath, then another. Actually, I said, tilting my head, I feel great. Marcus frowned. He looked at my empty glass, then at me. That's impossible. The dose was lethal. It would be, I agreed, if I had drunk it, but you know, Marcus, you really shouldn't mistreat the help. I looked at Chloe. Chloe stepped out of the shadows. She wasn't crying anymore. She was holding the silver serving tray against her chest like a shield. I switched the decanters, Chloe said, her voice trembling but clear. Before dinner, when you were yelling at me about the napkins. Marcus went still. What? The wine in your glass, I said, pointing at him. Is the poison, the wine in my glass? Came from the kitchen bottle. Marcus looked down at his glass. He hadn't drunk it. He had only pretended to toast. I didn't drink it, he sneered, pushing the glass away. Nice try, but you two amateurs forget who you're dealing with. He reached under the table. I knew what was coming. Chloe, down, I yelled. Marcus pulled a gun, a sleek, black pistol taped to the underside of the table. He leveled it at my chest. No more games, he said, his face twisting into a mask of pure hatred. No more poison. Just a bullet. It's messy, but it gets the job done. Shoot me, I said, holding up my hand. In it, I held a small remote detonator. And your legacy burns. Marcus hesitated. What is that? Dead man's switch. I lied. It was actually the control for the garage door, but in the dim red light, it looked menacing. Julian has the server data. If my heart stops, or if I press this button, every file from your black ledger is automatically emailed to the FBI, the SEC, and the New York Times. Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger. You're bluffing. Try me. I dared him. You pull that trigger. You go to prison for life, not for murder, but for fraud. You lose the money. You lose the fame. You become nothing, just like you tried to make me. The silence stretched, taut as a violin string. The rain hammered against the glass. Give me the drive, Marcus said, his voice low. Drop the gun, I countered. I can shoot you in the leg, he threatened. Make you talk. And I can press this button before I hit the floor, I shot back. We were at a stalemate. The air crackled with voltage. Suddenly, Chloe moved. She didn't attack him. She didn't scream. She simply walked over to the sideboard, picked up the bottle of expensive scotch Marcus's favorite and smashed it onto the floor. Crash! The smell of alcohol filled the room. "What are you doing?" Marcus yelled, distracted for a fraction of a second. "I'm quitting," Chloe said. She pulled a lighter from her pocket. "Don't!" Marcus screamed. Chloe flicked the lighter. She dropped it into the puddle of alcohol. Whoosh! Fire. Again. Just like 3 years ago. The flames roared up the curtains, feeding on the dry fabric. "You idiots!" Marcus shrieked, scrambling back as the heat hit him. "Run!" I grabbed Chloe's arm. We bolted for the door. Marcus didn't chase us immediately. He stood there, torn between shooting us and saving his precious dining room. His greed hesitated. That hesitation was all we needed. We burst out into the foyer. "The server room!" I yelled at Chloe. "He can't let the house burn. He has to save the hard drives." "Where are we going?" Chloe gasped, coughing from the smoke that was already curling along the ceiling. "To the roof," I said, dragging her toward the stairs. "Julian is bringing the chopper." "We're leaving." "No." I stopped at the landing, looking down at the inferno beginning to spread in the east wing. "I'm not leaving until he's finished, but we need high ground." I looked at my phone, a message from Julian. "FBI Cyber Division tipped off. ETA 10 minutes. I smiled. The fire was a distraction. The real bomb had already been dropped. "Come on," I told Chloe. "Let's go watch him burn." As we climbed, I heard Marcus screaming my name from the darkness below. It wasn't a scream of anger anymore. It was a scream of panic. He wasn't chasing a ghost. He was being chased by his own sins. But as we reached the roof access door, it wouldn't budge. I tugged at the handle, locked. "He electronically sealed the house," Chloe whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "Lockdown mode." "We're trapped," I realized, looking back down the stairs where the smoke was rising. "And he has a gun," Chloe added. I looked at the keypad. I pulled out my tablet. "Julian!" I shouted into my comms. "Override the roof locks now." "I can't!" Julian yelled back. "He's cut the external access. He's manually controlling the system from the basement." The basement. Of course. He hadn't stayed in the dining room. He had gone to the one place he felt safe, the one place he controlled completely. "He's baiting us," I said, realizing the horror of the situation. "He wants us to go down there, to the dungeon." I looked at Chloe. "We have to go down," I said. "We have to reset the system manually from the main breaker." "In the basement," Chloe whimpered. "That's where he killed you." "Yes," I said, gripping the railing. "And that's where I'm going to kill him." Smoke is a heavy, suffocating blanket. It doesn't just fill a room, it pushes you out, stealing the air from your lungs and replacing it with grit and heat. Above us, the east wing was roaring. The fire Chloe started consuming the silk drapes and antique furniture Marcus prized more than human life. "I can't breathe," Chloe choked, coughing into her sleeve as we stumbled down the service stairs. "Keep moving," I commanded, though my own throat felt like it had been scrubbed with steel wool. "The basement has its own ventilation. It's a bunker. It's the only place we won't suffocate. And the only place we might die by a bullet." We reached the heavy steel door at the bottom of the landing. The keypad was dead. Marcus had cut the power to the external panels to lock us in. But the manual override wheel was right there. I gripped the cold steel wheel. My hands were slick with sweat. "Ready," I whispered. Chloe nodded, terrified, gripping a heavy brass candlestick she had grabbed from the hallway. I spun the wheel, the tumblers clicked, I pushed. The door groaned open, revealing a maw of absolute darkness. The air that rushed out was stale, cold, and smelled of damp earth and old wine. It smelled like my nightmares. I stepped inside. My heels clicked on the concrete floor. Click, click, the same rhythm I had heard in my head for 3 years. "Marcus," I called out. My voice didn't tremble. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Silence. "He's not here," Chloe whispered, peering over my shoulder. "He's here," I said softly. "This is his kingdom." I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, dancing over dust motes. It swept across the rows of wine racks, the stacked crates of expensive vintage, and then it hit the far wall. My breath hitched. It was exactly as I had left it. The drafting table in the corner, the rusty shackle bolting to the stone wall, even the bucket in the corner. He hadn't cleaned it. He had kept it, a shrine to his ownership. My God, Chloe breathed, staring at the shackle. He kept you here. Welcome to the design studio, I said, my voice dripping with ice. Click. The sound of a hammer caulking. It came from the shadows behind the wine racks. I told you the lighting was perfect down here. Marcus's voice floated out, smooth and unbothered. I swung the flashlight beam toward the voice. Marcus stepped out. He was holding the gun loosely at his side. In his other hand, he held a glass of red wine. He looked entirely at ease, as if the house above wasn't burning down. Put the phone down, Elena, he said. The light hurts my eyes. I lowered the phone but didn't drop it. The FBI is 10 minutes away. Marcus, the fire department is probably 5. You can't win this. Win. Marcus laughed softly. I've already won. The fire will destroy the house. A tragic accident, defective wiring, and sadly, my fiancé and the unstable architect were trapped inside. I, miraculously, survived in the panic room. They have the ledger, I said. Julian sent it. Julian Thorne is a hacker, Marcus sneered, taking a sip of wine. Evidence obtained illegally is inadmissible in court. Any lawyer worth his salt knows that, but dead witnesses, they are very admissible. He raised the gun. Chloe, I whispered. Run for the breaker box. It's behind the furnace. No one is running, Marcus snapped. He fired. Bang! The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet sparked off the concrete floor inches from my foot. Chloe screamed and scrambled backward, tripping over a crate of Bordeaux. The next one goes in your knee, Marcus promised, walking toward me. Get over there, by the wall. Put the shackle on. You want me to chain myself up? I asked, standing my ground. It fits you, he said, his eyes gleaming with madness. It's where you belong. You're my creation, Elena. You don't get to walk away. I looked at the drafting table next to me. On it lay a dusty metal ruler, a heavy triangular scale ruler made of solid aluminum. Marcus was 5 feet away. Do it, he yelled. I moved, but not toward the shackle. I lunged for the drafting table. You bitch, Marcus raised the gun. I grabbed the metal ruler and flung it with all my strength. It wasn't a precision throw, but it spun through the air and cracked him square in the forehead. He howled, stumbling back, the gun discharging wildly into the ceiling. Chloe, the breaker, I screamed, diving at Marcus. I wasn't a fighter. I was an architect. I knew structure. I knew leverage. But Marcus was bigger, heavier, and fueled by rage. We crashed into the wine racks, bottles shattered, raining glass and expensive red liquid over us. It looked like blood. It smelled like money. Marcus backhanded me. His ring caught my cheekbone, a sharp, stinging burst of pain. I tasted copper in my mouth. I fell hard onto the wet concrete. Marcus loomed over me, blood trickling from the cut on his forehead, mixing with the wine on his shirt. I should have killed you 3 years ago, he hissed, pointing the gun at my face. His hand was shaking. I should have made sure. I looked up at him. The barrel of the gun looked like a tunnel. You didn't kill me because you needed me, I spat, wiping blood from my lip. You're nothing without my designs. Marcus, you're just a bricklayer in a suit. Shut up. He pressed the gun to my forehead. The metal was cold. Do it. I dared him. Shoot me, and then try to explain to the police why Alice Stone has a bullet in her head in your dungeon. I'll tell them you attacked me. With what a ruler. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Clunk. A heavy mechanical sound echoed from the far corner. The hum of the ventilation system changed pitch. Chloe had hit the breaker. The electronic locks on the doors above disengaged with a series of loud thuds. Police, federal agents, go, go, go. The shouts came from the stairs, muffled but unmistakable. Heavy boots thundering down the metal steps. Marcus froze. His eyes darted to the door. Fear, Pure, unadulterated panic washed over his face. The arrogance vanished. "No," he whispered. "No." He looked at me, then at the gun. For a second, I thought he was going to turn it on himself. But Marcus was a coward. Cowards don't kill themselves, they look for a way out. He scrambled up, slipping on the wine, and ran toward the service tunnel at the back of the cellar, an old Prohibition-era escape route. "He's running!" Chloe screamed from behind the furnace. The door to the basement burst open. Beams of tactical lights cut through the darkness, blinding us. FBI dropped the weapon down on the ground. I stayed on the floor, raising my hands. "He went into the tunnel. He has a gun." Two agents in full tactical gear swept past me, moving like shadows into the tunnel. Another agent knelt beside me. "Ma'am, are you injured?" I looked at him. I felt the bruise forming on my cheek. My dress was ruined. I was covered in wine and dust. But I smiled. "I'm fine," I said, my voice steady. "I'm finally fine." From deep within the tunnel, there was a shout, a scuffle, and then the distinct sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut. "Let go of me. Do you know who I am?" Marcus's voice echoed, shrill and pathetic. "Marcus Sterling, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and attempted murder." An agent's voice boomed back. "You have the right to remain silent." They dragged him back into the room. He looked wild, broken. He saw me sitting on the floor, bathed in the light of the police flashlights. Our eyes met. I didn't glare. I didn't gloat. I just looked at him with absolute indifference, the same way you look at a bug before you step on it. "Alice!" he screamed, thrashing against the agents. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." I stood up slowly, brushing the glass from my dress. "My name," I said, loud enough for every agent to hear, "is Elena Cross." Marcus went limp. The fight drained out of him. He knew. It was over. They hauled him up the stairs. Chloe emerged from behind the furnace. She was shaking, covered in soot. She looked at me. "Is he gone?" she whispered. "He's gone," I said. Above us, the fire alarm was still wailing, but down here, the air was clearing. I walked over to the drafting table. I picked up the metal ruler I had thrown. I wiped Marcus's blood off it with my thumb. "Come on, Chloe," I said. "Let's go watch the fire." We walked up the stairs, leaving the dungeon behind forever. The door didn't need to be locked anymore. The monster wasn't in the basement. He was in a cage. And I was free. The air outside the cliff tasted of rain, sea salt, and expensive tragedy. I sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a foil blanket draped over my shoulders like a superhero's cape. My red dress was torn, stained with wine and soot. My face was bruised. I looked like a wreck. But I refused to wipe the Marcus's blood off my cheek. Around me, the world was a chaotic strobe light of red and blue. Police cruisers, fire trucks, and unmarked federal SUVs clogged the driveway. And beyond the yellow tape, the sharks were circling. The press. They had smelled the smoke from Manhattan and swarmed. "Ms. Cross." A paramedic tried to wipe my face with a sterile pad. I pushed his hand away gently. "Leave it. The cameras need to see it." A black town car screeched to a halt near the barricade. Julian burst out. Ignoring the police officer trying to stop him, he ducked under the tape and ran toward me. "Elena." He didn't care about the cameras. He pulled me into his arms, burying his face in my hair. He smelled of rain and terror. "I thought I lost you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "When the signal cut out, I thought he had—" "He didn't," I said, pulling back to look at him. I placed a hand on his chest. His heart was hammering. "He's in the car. Julian. In cuffs." I pointed toward the armored FBI SUV. Through the tinted window, I could see a silhouette. Marcus Sterling, the king of New York real estate, sitting in the dark, waiting to be processed like a common criminal. "This isn't over," Julian said, his eyes hardening as he looked at the press line. "His lawyers are already on the phone. They'll spin this. They'll say you broke in. They'll say you're the aggressor." I stood up, letting the foil blanket slide off my shoulders. I smoothed my ruined dress. Let them try, I said. Alice Stone is dead, Elena Cross is back, and she has a statement to make. I walked toward the police barricade. The flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm. A wall of noise hit me, reporters shouting questions, microphones thrust over the tape. Ms. Stone, is it true you're actually Elena Sterling? Did you fake your death? Why was the house on fire? I stopped. I looked directly into the lens of the nearest news camera, Channel 4 live broadcast. I knew Marcus could see this from the police car. I didn't speak. I just pointed to my bruised cheek. Then I pointed to the burning house. And finally, I pointed to the FBI car where Marcus sat. The image was captured. It would be on the front page of every newspaper in America by morning. The victim, the survivor, the accuser. 12 hours later, the interrogation room. The coffee tasted like battery acid, but the room was warm. Special Agent Miller sat across from me. He looked tired. He had spent the night sifting through the terabytes of data Julian had handed over the black ledger. It's quite a story, Miss Cross, Miller said. Closing a file. Kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, identity theft, fraud, arson. I didn't start the fire, I said calmly. And the identity theft was necessary for survival. I was hiding from a man who had already tried to kill me once. Miller nodded. We verified the basement, the shackle on the wall. The DNA traces match yours. It corroborates your story and the financial data. It's a slam dunk. He was funneling millions into accounts under Miss Miller's name. Chloe is a victim too, I said quickly. She was coerced. She's agreed to testify. She's singing like a canary in the next room, Miller confirmed with a grim smile. She's terrified of going to prison. She's giving us everything, dates, times, conversations. Then you have him, I said, leaning back. We have enough to hold him for arraignment, Miller said, but Sterling has hired Arthur Vane. I stiffened. Arthur Vane, the acquittal king, the lawyer who could get a shark off for biting a swimmer? Vane is going to argue for bail, Miller warned. He'll paint you as a mentally unstable ex-wife who staged a dramatic return to frame her successful husband. He'll use your Alice Stone persona against you. He'll call it fraud. Let him, I said. I have something Vane can't spin. What's that? I have the public, I said. And I have the truth. The arraignment, New York Criminal Court. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled. Sketch artists were scribbling furiously. The air conditioning was struggling to keep up with the body heat. When the bailiff announced, "All rise," the tension was thick enough to choke on. Marcus was led in. He wasn't wearing an orange jumpsuit yet. His lawyer had ensured he appeared in a suit, but he looked diminished. The bandage on his forehead stood out starkly against his pale skin. He didn't look at the gallery. He stared straight ahead at the judge. I sat in the front row, right behind the prosecutor. Julian was on my left, looking like a bodyguard carved from granite. Arthur Vane stood up. He was a small man with a booming voice and a suit that cost more than my car. Your Honor, Vane bellowed. My client is a pillar of this community, a philanthropist, a visionary. The charges against him are based on the testimony of a disgruntled ex-fiancée and a woman who has been legally dead for 3 years, a woman who admits to living under a false identity. Vane turned to point a finger at me. This is not a criminal case, Your Honor. This is a domestic dispute gone wrong. A gone girl fantasy enacted by a woman with a history of mental instability. We request bail be set at $1 million. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on her nose, looked at the prosecutor. The people. The prosecutor stood up. Your Honor, the people request remand without bail. The defendant is a massive flight risk. Objection, Vane shouted. Mr. Sterling has surrendered his passport. Mr. Sterling, the prosecutor continued, his voice cutting through Vane's bluster, has access to a private jet which was fueled and idling on the tarmac at Teterboro Airport last night. We have flight logs. A murmur went through the courtroom. Furthermore, the prosecutor added, lifting a stack of papers, we have evidence of wire transfers totaling $50 million to non-extradition countries, This wasn't a domestic dispute. Your Honor, this was an exit strategy. Marcus flinched. He looked at Vane, panic flickering in his eyes. The judge frowned. She flipped through the documents. Mr. Vane, the judge said, her voice dry, your client seems to have been packing for a very long vacation. Your Honor, those transfers were for international business developments. Save it for the trial, the judge snapped. She slammed her gavel. Bang! Bail is denied. The defendant is remanded to custody at Rikers Island until trial. The sound of the gavel was the sweetest music I had ever heard. Take him away, the judge ordered. Two court officers moved toward Marcus. He stood up, his face twisting in disbelief. He was Marcus Sterling. He didn't go to jail. He bought jails. As they let him out, he turned. He didn't look at his lawyer. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at me. He didn't scream. He didn't rage. He simply stopped, causing the officers to shove him forward. He mouthed 3 words, no sound, just the movement of his lips. Check the foundation. A chill ran down my spine, colder than the ocean wind. Check the foundation. What did that mean? The foundation of the house, the charitable foundation, or... He's gone, Julian whispered, squeezing my hand. We won. I watched the door close behind Marcus. No, I whispered, my mind racing. He's not done. He planted a bomb, Julian, not a literal one, a figurative one. What do you mean? The foundation, I said, standing up abruptly. The Skylark Tower, the project he won the award for, the one I designed. What about it? He built it, I said, realizing the horror. But he built it without me. If he cut corners, if he changed the specs to save money like he always does. I looked at Julian, the blood draining from my face. My name is on the original designs, I said. If that tower falls, if there's a structural failure, he takes me down with him. He destroys my legacy from behind bars. Elena, Julian said, you're overthinking it. It's just a threat. We need to go, I said, pushing past the reporters who were closing in. I need to see the blueprints for the Skylark Tower. The built blueprints, not my drawings. I wasn't walking out into the sunlight of victory. I was walking into the shadow of a new disaster. Marcus knew he was going down, so he had set a trap that would trigger after he was gone. He wanted to prove that without him. My designs were deadly. Check the foundation. The words echoed in my mind, bouncing around like a bullet in a steel chamber. They drowned out the siren of the police escort that had led Marcus away. They drowned out the roar of the press. They drowned out the beating of my own heart. I sat in the passenger seat of Julian's Aston Martin, watching the city blur past in streaks of neon and gray rain. We were speeding down Fifth Avenue, weaving through the gridlock with a recklessness that usually would have terrified me. But right now, the only fear I felt was cold, heavy, and settled deep in my stomach like a stone. Elena, talk to me, Julian said, his knuckles white on the leather steering wheel. You haven't said a word since we left the courthouse. You're shaking. He embezzled $50 million. Julian, I said, my voice sounding hollow, distant. We saw the ledger. We saw the wire transfers. We did, Julian agreed, glancing at the rearview mirror to ensure we weren't being followed by paparazzi. And now he's paying for it. No. I shook my head, staring at the raindrops racing down the window glass. You don't understand construction. You don't just find $50 million in a project budget. You have to create it. You have to cut. I turned to look at him, my eyes wide. He didn't just skim profits. He gutted the materials. If he took that much money out of the Skylark Tower, he didn't just buy cheaper carpet, he bought cheaper bone. Julian's face tightened. He understood. The concrete... The core, I whispered. The spine of the building. If he compromised the structural integrity of the foundation to pocket the difference, that building isn't a skyscraper. It's a vertical coffin. The Skylark Tower loomed ahead of us, 80 stories of twisting glass and steel, piercing the low-hanging clouds. It was beautiful. My design, my masterpiece. I had drawn those curves to mimic the flight of a bird, light and airy. But now, looking at it, I didn't see a bird. I saw a needle balancing on a thimble. The building is fully occupied, Julian noted, his voice grim. Residential units from floor 40 to 80. Commercial below. There must be 2,000 people inside right now. And there's a tropical storm warning for tonight, I added, looking at the dark sky. High winds, stress on the frame. We skidded to a halt at the service entrance in the back alley. The main plaza was too exposed. The press would be camping there, waiting for a statement from the architect savior. They didn't know the savior was about to become the harbinger of doom. How do we get in? Julian asked, cutting the engine. The building management is loyal to Sterling. They won't just let us waltz into the sub-basement. We don't ask, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. We break in. Again. I didn't have my drafting tools this time. I didn't have a plan. I just had a terrifying suspicion and a keycard I had swiped from Marcus's jacket pocket when we struggled in the basement. It was a long shot. But if he was the control freak I knew he was, he would have a master key that opened every door in his empire. We sprinted through the rain to the steel service door. A security camera blinked above us, its red eye watching. I've looped it, Julian said, tapping his smartwatch. You have 30 seconds before the guard at the console realizes his screen is frozen. I pressed Marcus's card to the reader. Beep! Green light. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He really was arrogant, I muttered, pushing the door open. He never thought anyone would take his keys. We entered the loading dock. It smelled of diesel fumes and wet cardboard. The hum of the building surrounded us, a low, vibrating thrum of electricity and plumbing. It sounded like a giant beast breathing in its sleep. Sub-basement 4, I said, heading for the freight elevator. That's where the main load-bearing columns meet the bedrock. If he cheated, that's where the evidence will be. The elevator ride was agonizingly slow. Each floor we passed was a reminder of the weight pressing down on us. 80 floors of steel, glass, furniture, and people, millions of tons, all resting on the concrete we were about to inspect. Ding! The doors slid open. The air in sub-basement 4 was different. It was cold, damp, and smelled of raw earth. There were no polished floors here, just raw concrete and massive pillars the size of redwood trees, disappearing into the darkness of the ceiling. It looks solid, Julian said, shining his tactical flashlight on the nearest column. Concrete always looks solid until it fails, I said, walking up to the pillar. It's what's inside that counts. I ran my hand over the gray surface. It felt rough, gritty. The mix, I murmured, closing my eyes to focus on the texture. It feels dusty. Dusty. Concrete should be like stone, I explained. Opening my eyes, it should be dense, cold. This feels room temperature. It's too porous. I looked around. I needed a tool, something to test the hardness. I spotted a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. I grabbed it, not to spray, but to use the heavy metal pin. What are you doing? Julian asked. A scratch test, I said, crude but effective. I took the sharp metal pin and drove it into the side of the column with as much force as I could muster. In a properly cured high-grade concrete column, the kind required for a skyscraper of this magnitude, the metal should have skated off, maybe leaving a faint white scratch. Instead, the pin sank in. It went in 1/4 of an inch. I gasped, pulling it back. A shower of gray dust crumbled out of the hole. Oh my God, I whispered. That's bad, isn't it? Julian asked, stepping closer. It's not just bad. Julian, it's criminal. I scraped the hole wider. The concrete flaked away like stale cake. This is a 3,000 psi mix, maybe 4,000 if we're lucky. My blueprints called for 12,000 psi high-performance concrete. This is sidewalk cement. I dug deeper. My fingernails scraped against something hard. The rebar, I said. Let's see the steel. I used the pin to chip away more of the weak outer layer. I exposed the metal reinforcing bar underneath. It was rusted. He used recycled steel, I said, my voice trembling with rage. He used rusty, second-rate scrap metal instead of galvanized steel, and look at the spacing. I moved the pin 3 inches to the right, nothing. I moved it another 3 inches, nothing. The rebar spacing should be every 4 inches for a load this heavy, I said, standing up and backing away from the pillar as if it were a bomb. He spaced them at 12, maybe 18. So he saved money on the steel and the cement, Julian summarized, looking up at the massive column that was holding up the building. How much did he save? $50 million, I said bitterly. He gutted the skeleton to buy himself a getaway island. Suddenly, a deep, resonant groan echoed through the basement. It sounded like a whale calling from the depths of the ocean. It vibrated through the floor, traveling up through the soles of my shoes. Julian grabbed my arm. What was that? Wind, I said, looking at the ceiling. The storm outside. The wind is hitting the upper floors. The building is swaying. Buildings are supposed to sway, right? Julian asked, his voice tight. Yes, I said. They sway to dissipate energy, but to sway, they need a flexible, strong core. If the core is brittle... Crack! The sound was sharp, like a gunshot. It came from the pillar in front of us. A hairline fracture appeared on the surface of the concrete, starting from the ceiling and racing down toward the floor like a jagged stroke of lightning. Dust puffed out of the crack. Run, I whispered. What? Run! I screamed, shoving Julian toward the elevator. Another groan, louder this time. The entire basement seemed to shift. The lights flickered. We scrambled into the freight elevator. I slammed the lobby button. The building is failing. I panted as the doors closed, shutting out the sight of the cracking pillar. It's not a future problem. Julian, it's happening now. The wind shear is too high for the cheap concrete. We need to evacuate, Julian said, pulling out his phone. I'll call 911. No. I grabbed his hand. If we call 911, they'll send a fire truck. They'll spend an hour assessing the situation. We don't have an hour. We have maybe 20 minutes before the wind hits peak velocity. So what do we do? The elevator dinged at the lobby level. The lobby was calm. People were walking around with umbrellas, checking their phones, drinking coffee. They had no idea that 4 floors below them, the legs of the giant were snapping. I looked at the fire alarm pull station on the wall next to the concierge desk. We commit a felony, I said. I marched across the marble floor. Hey, you can't be in here, a security guard shouted, recognizing me from the news. That's the crazy lady, grab her. I didn't stop. I reached the red box. Elena, Julian warned, watching the guards rush us. I grabbed the handle. I'm sorry, I whispered to the building I loved. I pulled it. Weep, weep, weep. The strobe lights exploded into life. The deafening alarm filled the cavernous lobby. Evacuate! I screamed, turning to the confused crowd. This is not a drill. Get out. Everyone get out. The security guard tackled me. I hit the floor hard, my shoulder slamming against the marble. You're crazy, the guard yelled, pinning my arms. First you burned down your house. Now you're trying to clear the tower. You're going to jail, lady. Listen to me, I shouted, struggling against his grip. The foundation is cracking. The building is going to collapse. Yeah, right, the guard sneered. And I'm the Easter Bunny. You're just looking for attention. He keyed his radio. Control, cancel the alarm. We got a 1096 in the lobby. It's the Sterling ex-wife. She's pulled the alarm. No, I screamed. Don't cancel it. Look at the walls. Suddenly, the floor beneath us jumped. It wasn't a vibration. It was a jolt, like the building had dropped an inch. The glass revolving doors at the entrance shattered. Crash! The guard froze on top of me. The sneer vanished from his face. The chandelier above the concierge desk began to swing violently. Does that feel like a false alarm to you? I hissed. Julian pulled the guard off me. Get up. We need to get these people out. The guard looked at the shattered doors, then at me. What do we do? He asked, his voice trembling. Get on the PA system, I ordered, standing up and smoothing my dress. Tell them to use the stairs. Do not use the elevators. The shafts will twist and trap them. Move. The guard scrambled behind the desk. I looked at Julian. 80 floors, I said. 2,000 people. And the wind is just getting started. We can't save everyone, Julian said softly. I designed this death trap, I said, looking up at the ceiling. I'm not leaving until the last person is out. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered it, shouting over the alarm. Who is this? Hello, architect? The voice was tinny, echoing. It was coming from a jail phone. Marcus. You felt it, didn't you? Marcus asked, his voice calm, almost serene. The little shudder that was the sheer wall giving way. You sick bastard! I screamed. There are families in here. I know, Marcus said. And when it falls, Elena, when my tower falls, the world won't blame the man in the cell. They'll blame the woman who drew the blueprints. They'll blame the unstable genius who cut corners. I proved the materials were yours. Did you? Marcus chuckled. Check the change orders. Elena, the digital signatures on the material substitutions. They're yours. I used your stamp. I used your login. My blood ran cold. You framed me, I whispered. I always have a contingency plan, Marcus said. If I go down, I take your reputation with me. Enjoy the view. Darling, it's going to be a spectacular fall. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. The building groaned again. Louder this time. Dust began to fall from the ceiling tiles like snow. He signed the change orders with my name, I told Julian, my voice numb. If this building falls, I'm not a hero. I'm a mass murderer. Then we make sure it doesn't fall, Julian said fiercely. Or we save enough people that it doesn't matter. No, I said, my mind racing. We can't stop gravity, but we might be able to buy time. How? The hydraulic dampener, I said, eyes widening. On the roof, the tuned mass damper. It's a 700-ton counterweight designed to stabilize the building in high winds. So, if Marcus cheaped out on the concrete, he probably disabled the dampener to save on electricity. I realized, if we can get to the roof and manually engage the dampener, we might be able to balance the sway. We might keep the building standing long enough to get everyone out. The roof. Julian looked at the swaying ceiling. Elena, that's 80 floors up, in a building that's about to collapse. I know, I said, kicking off my high heels. I stood barefoot on the cold marble. Are you coming? Julian looked at me. He smiled a terrified, reckless smile. I always wanted to see the view. We ran toward the stairs, moving against the tide of screaming people fleeing for their lives. We were running straight into the sky, into the teeth of the storm, to fight a battle against physics itself. The stairwell was a river of human panic, flowing downward with the force of a flash flood, and we were the only two salmon trying to swim upstream. Move! Keep right! I screamed, my voice raw and shredding against the cacophony of 2,000 people fighting for their lives. A businessman in a torn suit slammed into my shoulder, nearly knocking me back down the concrete steps. He didn't even look at me. His eyes were wide, white-rimmed with terror, fixed on the exit signs below. Sorry, Julian gasped, using his broad shoulders to act as a plow, clearing a narrow path for me against the wall. Make a whole emergency personnel coming through. It was a lie, but it worked. The crowd parted just enough for us to squeeze past, step by agonizing step. Floor 12, floor 13, floor 14. My lungs were already burning. My bare feet I had kicked off my heels in the lobby were slick with sweat and grime. Slapping against the cold metal treads, every step was a battle. Gravity was pulling me down. The crowd was pushing me down, and the building itself was trying to shake me off. Creak, groan. The sound was vibrating through the handrail I was gripping. It wasn't just the wind anymore. It was the steel skeleton of the tower crying out in pain. The cheap rebar Marcus had installed was stretching, snapping, failing to hold the concrete together. Elena, pace yourself! Julian yelled over the din of a fire alarm that seemed to be drilling into my skull. We don't have time to pace, I choked out, hauling myself up another landing. Floor 20. We have 60 more to go. 60. If you pass out, we save no one. He was right, but the image of Marcus's smirk in my mind was a better stimulant than oxygen. Check the foundation. He wanted this. He wanted his own tower to fall, crushing thousands, just so my name would be buried in the rubble. He was willing to be a mass murderer, to be a martyr. We hit floor 42. The flow of people suddenly stopped. The stairwell was gridlocked. Screams were rising from above. Why have we stopped? A woman near me sobbed, clutching a potted plant like it was a baby. Why aren't we moving? Stay here, I told Julian. I pushed my way up through the crush of bodies. On the landing between 42 and 43, I saw the problem. A massive fissure had opened in the concrete wall of the stairwell. Cinder blocks had crumbled, spilling a mountain of debris across the stairs, blocking the path completely. It's blocked, a man yelled. We're trapped. Back up, I ordered, my architect voice cutting through the hysteria. Everyone, turn around. Use the east stairwell. Go through the 42nd floor hallway. The hallway is swaying, someone shrieked. Better to sway than to be buried. I grabbed the nearest man by his lapels. Lead them. Now. As the crowd began to shuffle back down to the 42nd floor door, I looked at Julian. We can't go up this way, I said, coughing in the dust cloud rising from the rubble. We have to cross the floor, Julian said, looking at the door to the office level. We have to get to the west stairwell. We burst out of the heavy fire door and into the 42nd floor offices of a hedge fund. The scene was surreal. Computers were still on, screens glowing with stock tickers. Half-eaten sandwiches sat on desks, but the room was pitching like the deck of a ship in a hurricane. Whoosh! The wind outside was howling, battering the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Rain was smashing against the panes so hard it looked like the glass was boiling. As I took a step, the floor dropped beneath me. I stumbled, grabbing a cubicle wall for support. Jesus, Julian hissed, spreading his legs to keep his balance. It's moving 3 feet, at least. It's twisting, I corrected, watching the ceiling tiles shift and pop out of their grid. The core isn't stiff enough. The building is corkscrewing. We ran across the open office floor. It was like running on a treadmill that was constantly changing its incline. Uphill, downhill, left tilt, right tilt. Crack! A window blew out. A massive pane of glass, stressed beyond its limit by the twisting frame, exploded inward. The pressure difference sucked papers, staplers, and a rolling chair out into the stormy void. Down, Julian tackled me. We slid across the carpet as wind and rain roared into the office. The suction was immense. I clawed at the carpet, feeling the drag of the storm trying to pull me out of the building. The stairwell, Julian roared, dragging me by the waist. We scrambled on hands and knees toward the west exit. The wind was deafening, a physical weight on our backs. We threw ourselves through the door and the heavy steel slammed shut, cutting off the roar of the wind. Silence, just the heavy, rhythmic thud of our hearts. Floor 42, I wheezed, wiping rainwater from my eyes. Halfway. Are you hurt? Julian checked my arms. I was covered in glass dust, but bleeding only superficially. Go, I said, up! The west stairwell was emptier. Most people were below this level by now. It was just us and the ghost of the building. The climb from floor 50 to 70 was a blur of agony. My legs were screaming. My lungs felt like they were filled with acid. Every step was a negotiation with my body not to quit. Julian was slowing down. He was strong, but he was carrying the weight of the tech gear in his backpack, and the lack of oxygen at this exertion level was hitting him. Leave the bag, I gasped at floor 65. No, he panted, sweat dripping from his nose. I might need the tools to override the lock. We just need a crowbar, I said. I have a digital crowbar, he managed a weak smile. Floor 75. The sway was violent now. We were being thrown against the handrails with every gust. The building was groaning louder, a metallic screeching like a subway train braking hard. It's going to snap, I whispered to myself. The connections can't take this torque. Floor 78. Floor 79. Floor 80. The mechanical level. We fell against the door. It was locked, marked with danger signs. High voltage. Restricted access. Julian didn't use his hacking tool. He didn't have the energy. He pulled a heavy fire axe from the emergency case on the wall and swung it at the handle. Clang! One hit, two hits, the lock shattered. We kicked the door open and stumbled into the heart of the beast. The mechanical room was cavernous, occupying the top 3 floors of the tower. It was loud, the hum of massive HVAC fans, the whine of pumps. And there, in the center, suspended by massive hydraulic pistons and steel cables, was the tuned mass damper. It was a sphere of solid steel weighing 700 tons, painted a bright, warning yellow. In a functioning building, this sphere should be floating, swaying gently in opposition to the wind, counteracting the movement of the tower. When the building pushed right, the ball should swing left, killing the momentum. But the ball was still, dead still, while the floor beneath us pitched and rolled, threatening to throw us into the machinery. The massive counterweight was locked in place. He locked it! I screamed over the noise of the wind howling through the louvers. He clamped the dampener. We ran across the catwalk toward the sphere. At the base of the massive steel ball, I saw it. Massive steel brakes, huge calipers meant to lock the sphere during maintenance were engaged. They were clamped tight around the base of the sphere. The control panel. I pointed to a console on the wall. Julian ran to it. His fingers flew across the keyboard. "Access denied," he yelled. "He's hard-coded a lockout. I can't override it remotely. It's a manual lockdown." "There has to be a manual release," I shouted, looking at the hydraulic lines feeding the brakes. I jumped down from the catwalk, landing on the swaying floor next to the massive sphere. It loomed over me like a moon. I found the hydraulics manifold. There was a large red wheel labeled Emergency Brake Release. "Here!" I yelled. "Julian, help me!" We both grabbed the wheel. It was cold and greasy. "On 3, I screamed. 1, 2, 3. We pulled. It didn't budge. "It's rusted shut," Julian grunted, straining until the veins in his neck popped. "It's not rust," I said, looking closer at the mechanism. I saw a flash of silver metal jammed into the gears of the release wheel. I pulled out my phone flashlight. Wedged deep inside the gears was a titanium crowbar. "He jammed it," I whispered, horror washing over me. "He physically jammed the gears. We can't turn the wheel." The building lurched. A massive gust of wind hit the tower. I lost my footing and slid across the oily floor, slamming into the steel railing. "Elena," Julian scrambled after me. "The tower is reaching critical resonance," I yelled. Looking at the vibration gauge on the wall, the needle was in the red. "If we don't release this ball in the next 5 minutes, the core snaps, and we ride this building down to the street." "How do we get the bar out?" Julian shouted, kicking the jammed crowbar. "It's under tons of pressure." I looked at the hydraulic lines. They were thick, reinforced rubber hoses pulsing with pressurized fluid. "We can't turn the wheel," I said, my eyes locking onto the fire axe Julian was still holding. "So we have to bleed the brakes." "What?" "Cut the line." I pointed to the main hydraulic hose. "If we sever the pressure line, the calipers will lose power and open." "Are you insane?" Julian yelled. "That line is under 5,000 psi of pressure. If I cut it, the fluid will come out like a laser. It'll slice me in half." "Not if you hit it from the side," I argued, though I knew the risk. "It's the only way. We have to kill the pressure." Julian looked at the axe, then at the hose, then at me. "If I miss—" "Don't miss," I pleaded. "Julian, please, for the 2,000 people downstairs." He nodded. He took a deep breath. Stepping up to the throbbing black hose, he raised the axe. The building swung violently to the left. "Wait!" I screamed. But he was already swinging. The floor tilted. Julian lost his balance mid-swing. The axe head missed the sweet spot of the hose and struck the steel coupling instead. Clang! Sparks flew. The axe bounced off, flying out of his hands and skittering across the floor, sliding under the massive 700-ton steel ball. "The axe!" Julian gasped. We both looked. The axe was lying directly underneath the suspended weight. And the hydraulic coupling Julian had hit, it was hissing. A fine mist of oil was spraying out. "It's leaking," I yelled. "The pressure is dropping, but it's too slow." "We need the axe back," Julian said, moving to crawl under the ball. No, I grabbed him. If the pressure drops enough, that ball is going to drop and swing if you're under it. You'll be crushed into paste. We have to finish the cut, Julian yelled, pointing at the hissing line. The leak is too small. The building will snap before the brakes release. I looked around frantically. I didn't have an axe. I didn't have a crowbar. I looked at my hands. I was holding nothing. Then I looked at my feet. The only thing hard enough to puncture a high-pressure line was the heel of a stiletto. But I was barefoot. I looked across the room. My shoes. I had kicked them off in the lobby. No, I had kicked them off here. When I jumped down from the catwalk, one of them was lying near the hose. A Christian Louboutin, 4 inches of steel shank wrapped in plastic and red lacquer. The shoe, I whispered. I scrambled for it. Elena, what are you doing? Physics, I yelled. Pressure equals force divided by area A. Stiletto heel concentrates force into a pinpoint. I grabbed the shoe. I crawled toward the hissing, angry hydraulic line. The oil was spraying in my face, blinding me. It smelled acrid and hot. I raised the shoe like a dagger. When I puncture this, I screamed at Julian, the fluid is going to explode. Pull me back the second I hit it. Ready. Julian grabbed the back of my dress. I looked at the hose. I thought of Marcus. I thought of the shackle. I thought of the foundation. Go to hell, Marcus, I screamed. I drove the steel heel of the stiletto into the bulging rubber hose with every ounce of hate I possessed. The sound wasn't a hiss, it was a detonation. When the steel point of my heel pierced the rubber skin of the high-pressure line, the air in the mechanical room turned into a white mist of atomized hydraulic fluid. It hit me like a physical punch to the chest, a wall of hot, slick oil moving at the speed of a bullet. Back! Julian screamed, his grip on my dress tightening instantly. He yanked me backward with such force that my feet left the ground. We flew through the air, tumbling over the slick metal grating just as the hose whipped loose. Thwack! The severed line lashed out like an angry cobra, striking the steel railing where my head had been a millisecond ago. It dented the solid iron bar as if it were tinfoil. If Julian hadn't pulled me, that hose would have taken my head off. We skidded across the oily floor, crashing into a pile of canvas tarps. I gasped for air, wiping the viscous, foul-smelling fluid from my eyes. I was blind, choking on the metallic taste of industrial oil. Stay down. Julian covered my body with his, shielding me from the spray. Then, the sound changed. The screeching of this pressurized fluid died down, replaced by a metallic clunk that shook the teeth in my skull. It was the sound of the massive steel calipers releasing their death grip on the sphere. For a heartbeat, there was silence. The building was still leaning dangerously to the left, pushed by the gale-force winds outside. Then gravity took over. The 700-ton steel ball, finally free, obeyed the laws of physics. It didn't just move, it dropped and swung. Groan. The noise was apocalyptic. It sounded like the earth itself was splitting open. The massive counterweight swung violently to the right, rushing to correct the lean of the tower. Brace yourself, I yelled, digging my fingers into Julian's arm. The whiplash hit the top of the tower, which had been bent over like a sapling in a storm, suddenly snapped back to the center. It was a violent, jerking motion, a massive, structural correction that threw everything in the room sideways. Toolboxes slid across the floor. The fire axe spun away into the darkness. I felt my stomach lurch into my throat as the floor seemed to drop out from under us, then slam back up. It felt like being inside a car crash, but in slow motion, and the car was 80 stories tall. Kriak boom! The building swayed past the center point, tilting to the right, but then the ball swung back left. Left, right, left, right. The motion was sickening, wild, terrifying, but with every swing, the arc became smaller. The screaming of the steel frame began to quiet. The violent shuddering that had threatened to tear the rivets apart smoothed out into a rhythmic, controlled sway. The giant had stopped trembling, it was breathing again. I lay there on the cold, oily floor, my chest heaving. The wind was still howling outside, battering the glass. But the floor beneath me felt solid. The deadly corkscrew twisting motion was gone. "It's holding," Julian whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. He lifted his head, oil dripping from his nose. "Elena, it's holding." I pushed myself up, my arms shaking uncontrollably. I looked at the vibration gauge on the wall. The needle, which had been buried in the red critical zone, was slowly drifting back into the yellow. "We did it," I rasped, spitting out the taste of oil. "The core didn't snap." I looked toward the damper. The massive yellow sphere was moving now, gliding silently on its pistons. A gentle giant dancing with the wind to keep us safe. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I looked down at my hand. I was still clutching the ruined Christian Louboutin. The heel was snapped off, embedded somewhere in the hydraulic line. A $600 shoe destroyed to save $1 billion tower. "You look," Julian started, wiping a smear of grease from my cheek, then stopped. He started to laugh. A breathless, hysterical laugh of pure relief. "You look like a mechanic who just crawled out of an engine." "I feel like I just went 12 rounds with a truck." I managed a weak smile. "And you look like an oil slick in a suit." He pulled me up. My legs wobbled, but he held me steady. We stood there for a moment in the humming mechanical room, two tiny figures inside the machine we had just saved. "We have to go down," I said, sobering up. "The danger isn't over. The storm is still peaking. We need to make sure the evacuation is complete." "The elevators are definitely out," Julian noted, looking at the control panel which was flashing red error codes. 80 floors, I sighed, kicking off my other shoe. "Barefoot." "I'd carry you," Julian said, looking at the door. "But I think my back would give out around floor 40. "Walk with me," I said, taking his hand. "That's enough." The descent was a blur of repetition and pain. Floor 70. Empty. Papers scattered everywhere. Floor 60. A abandoned shoe on the landing. A dropped phone. Floor 50. The silence was heavier here. The panic had drained away, leaving only the ghost of fear. My feet were bleeding by floor 30. The glass and debris in the stairwell cut into my soles, but the adrenaline masked the worst of it. We didn't speak much. We saved our breath for the task of putting one foot in front of the other. But my mind was loud. I was thinking of Marcus. He was sitting in a cell right now, waiting for the news, waiting for the breaking news banner that said Skylark Tower collapses, thousands dead. He was waiting for his final victory. He was going to be disappointed. Floor 10, we heard voices, firefighters. "Hello," Julian shouted, his voice echoing down the concrete shaft. "We have survivors coming down." A firefighter in full gear appeared on the landing below, looking up in shock. "The building is clear," he yelled up. "We thought everyone was out. Identify yourselves." "I'm the architect," I shouted back, "and I'm coming out." We burst into the lobby on the ground floor. It was a war zone. The revolving doors were shattered. Rain was blowing in, soaking the expensive rugs. But the building was standing. It was scarred. It was groaning. But it was standing. A triage center had been set up near the concierge desk. Paramedics were treating people for cuts and bruises. But there were no body bags. "They got out," I whispered, looking around. "They all got out." "Because you pulled the alarm," Julian said. "You saved them. Elena." A police captain approached us, looking stern. He saw our conditions soaked in oil, barefoot, bleeding, exhausted. He recognized us from the news reports. "Miss Cross," he said, nodding respectfully. "We have a structural engineer team outside. They say the sway has stabilized. They don't know how." "Physics," I said, wiping my face with the back of my hand, "and a very expensive shoe." "The press is outside," the captain warned. "It's a zoo. Do you want a back exit?" I looked at Julian. He nodded. He knew what I needed to do. "No," I said, straightening my spine. "I'm not hiding. Not anymore. I want the front door." We walked out into the night. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. The flashing lights of the emergency vehicles painted the wet pavement in strokes of red and blue. As soon as we stepped past the police line, the roar of the crowd hit us. It wasn't just reporters. It was the tenants, the people who had fled the building, hundreds of them, huddled under blankets, looking up at their home which was still scraping the sky. A hush fell over the crowd as they saw us, two figures coated in black oil, holding hands. A reporter thrust a microphone in my face. Ms. Cross, did the building fail? Was Marcus Sterling right? Is the Skylark Tower unsafe?" I stopped. I looked up at the tower. It was swaying gently, safely. The yellow light of the mechanical room on the 80th floor was a beacon in the storm. I looked directly into the camera. "The Skylark Tower was sabotaged," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the crowd. "The concrete was compromised, the steel was stolen. Marcus Sterling tried to turn this building into a tomb to bury his crimes." The crowd gasped, flashbulbs erupted. "But," I continued, my voice rising, "he forgot one thing. He forgot that a building is more than just materials. It has a soul, and its soul is the design." I pointed at the top of the tower. "The damper is active, the building is stable, it will not fall, because I fixed what he broke." I looked down at my dirty, bleeding feet, then back at the camera. "Marcus told me to check the foundation," I said, my eyes cold and hard. I did. The foundation was rotten, but the spine is made of steel, and so am I. "Tell Marcus," I finished, staring into the lens as if I were staring into his cell. "Tell him his tower still stands, and so does his wife." For a second, there was silence. Then someone in the crowd started clapping. It was the security guard who had tackled me earlier. He was standing by an ambulance, his arm in a sling. He clapped slowly, nodding at me. Then another person joined in, then another. Soon, the entire street was erupting in applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was the thunderous, emotional applause of people who knew they had just cheated death. I felt Julian's hand squeeze mine. "You did it," he whispered in my ear. I didn't smile. I was too tired to smile. I just leaned my head on his shoulder, letting the rain wash the oil from my face. We had won the battle. The house was gone. The tower was saved. Marcus was in jail. But as I looked at the crowd, I saw a face. Standing at the edge of the police tape, wearing a hooded raincoat, was a man. He wasn't clapping. He was watching me. He held a phone to his ear. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the alley. My stomach tightened. "Julian," I whispered, "who is that?" Julian looked. "Who?" "The man in the raincoat. He was watching us." "Everyone is watching us, Elena." "No," I shook my head. This was different. He looked professional. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with oily fingers. A text message, unknown number. "The tower stands. Impressive. But the foundation of a life is family. Have you checked yours lately?" I froze. Family. My parents were dead. Marcus killed them. I had no siblings. Then it hit me. The adoption records, the ones I had sealed years ago, the secret I had kept even from Marcus. "The child." My breath caught in my throat. "Julian," I gasped, clutching his arm. "The car! Get the car!" "What is it? What's wrong?" "He has a backup plan," I whispered, staring at the text. He knows. He knows about the baby." "What baby?" Julian looked at me, confusion washing over his face. "My son," I said, the words tearing out of my throat. "The one I gave up when I was 19. The one Marcus swore he didn't know about." I looked back at the alley where the man had vanished. Marcus Sterling didn't just want to destroy my reputation, he wanted to destroy my heart. "We have to go," I said, panic rising again, sharper than the fear of the collapsing tower. "We have to find him before they do." The applause of the crowd faded into background noise. The victory was ashes in my mouth. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to a new battlefield. The Aston Martin tore through the Holland Tunnel, the orange sodium lights strobing over us like the heartbeat of a dying star. I was shivering, not from the cold or the shock of the oil soaking my dress, but from a terror that made the collapse of a skyscraper feel like a minor inconvenience. "Talk to me, Elena," Julian demanded, his voice tight. He swerved around a taxi, running a red light as we burst out into the New Jersey night. You said son, you said gave up. I need facts, not panic. I stared at the dashboard, my hands gripping the leather until my knuckles turned white. The secret I had buried under layers of ambition, shame, and concrete was clawing its way out. I was 19, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. I was a scholarship student at Pratt, broke, hungry, and pregnant. The father, Julian asked, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. A mistake, I said bitterly. A fellow student. He vanished the moment he saw the second line on the test. I was alone, Julian. I couldn't feed myself, let alone a baby. I wanted to build towers, not ruin a child's life with my poverty. I took a shuddering breath. So I did the only thing I could. I found a closed adoption agency, a good family. I signed the papers the day he was born. I held him for 10 minutes. I named him Leo, and then I walked away and never looked back. Until Marcus, Julian surmised, his jaw clenching. Marcus found out, I said. He must have dug it up years ago and kept it in his back pocket, a nuclear option. Why now? Because I took his money, I said, looking at the dark road ahead. I took his reputation. I took his freedom. So he's going to take the only thing I have left that is pure. He's going to destroy Leo to break me. He can't touch the boy, Julian argued. It's a closed adoption. Legally, you have no connection to him. Marcus has no connection. Marcus doesn't care about the law, I snapped. He cares about leverage. If he gets to Leo, if he tells Leo who I am, or worse. My phone buzzed again, another text from the unknown number. 142 Willow Creek Lane, Westchester. Nice neighborhood. Shame about the security. He gave me the address, I gasped, shoving the phone at Julian. He's taunting me. He's already there. Julian glanced at the screen. That's 40 minutes away. I can make it in 20. He slammed the car into sport mode. The engine roared, pinning me back against the seat. Get me the file, I ordered, pulling out Julian's laptop from the back seat. I need to know who the parents are. I need to warn them. I'm on it, Julian said, tapping the car's voice command. Computer, run a reverse search on 142 Willow Creek Lane. Cross-reference with adoption records from 2014. The screen on the dashboard lit up. Owners, David and Sarah Bennett. Status upper middle class. No criminal record. Call them, I said. Find a number. Julian's fingers flew across the console, dialing. The line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Click. Hello, a woman's voice, confused, tired. Mrs. Bennett, I said, my voice trembling. My name is Elena Cross. You don't know me, but I know who you are. Sarah Bennett interrupted. Her voice wasn't confused anymore. It was terrified. The man is here. He said you would call. My blood froze. Who is there? Sarah. He says he's a lawyer, Sarah whispered. I could hear a child crying in the background. He says there's a problem with the adoption papers. He says, oh God, David, don't. There was a scuffle, a heavy thud, and then the line went dead. Step on it, I told Julian. The suburbs of Westchester were asleep. Manicured lawns, white picket fences, silence. It was the American dream that I had sold my son to so he could have a better life. We screeched to a halt in front of 142 Willow Creek Lane. It was a beautiful colonial house with a basketball hoop in the driveway. A black sedan was parked on the curb. The engine was idling. That's him, I said. I jumped out of the car before it stopped moving. I didn't care that I was barefoot, covered in hydraulic oil, and wearing a ruined designer dress. I ran up the driveway like a banshee. The front door was unlocked. I burst into the living room. The scene was terrifyingly calm. David Bennett, a man in his 40s wearing pajamas, was sitting on the sofa. He was holding an ice pack to his head. Sarah Bennett was clutching a young boy Leo on the armchair. They were both staring at the man standing by the fireplace. He was wearing a beige raincoat over a pristine suit. He held a briefcase. He looked like an accountant, but he radiated the menace of a hitman. "Miss Cross," the man said, checking his watch. "You made good time. I'm Mr. Graves." "Get out of this house," I snarled, stepping between him and the family. "I'm afraid I can't do that," Graves said smoothly. "I am the appointed legal guardian of the Bennett estate." "What?" David Bennett shouted, standing up. "You broke into my house. You hit me." "I entered to serve urgent notice," Graves corrected, unbothered. "And you fell. Mr. Bennett, let's not be dramatic." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. "You see," Graves continued, looking at me, "Mr. Sterling is a very thorough man. When he purchased the bank that holds the mortgage on this lovely home, and the car loans, and Mr. Bennett's small business loan, he noticed some irregularities." He dropped the file on the coffee table. "He called in the debt," Graves said. "Tonight, all of it, immediate repayment, margin call." "That's illegal," Julian shouted, rushing into the room behind me. "It's aggressive," Graves smirked, "but perfectly legal under the terms of the predatory loans Mr. Bennett signed. The Bennetts are, as of 10 minutes ago, bankrupt, destitute, homeless." Sarah Bennett sobbed, hugging Leo tighter. Leo looked at me. He had my eyes, the same heterochromatic mix of blue and gold. He looked terrified. "Why are you doing this?" Leo asked, his voice small. "We aren't doing anything, Leo," Graves said, crouching down to the boy's eye level. "We are offering a solution." He looked at me. "Mr. Sterling is willing to forgive the debt. He will let the Bennetts keep their house, their business, their life." "In exchange for what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. It made me sick. Graves stood up. "In exchange for custody," he said, "Mr. Sterling has expressed a desire to sponsor a troubled youth. He wants to sign guardianship papers for Leo." "Over my dead body," David Bennett yelled. "Then you will be dead broke," Graves countered coldly. "And Child Protective Services will take Leo anyway because you won't have a roof to put over his head. Mr. Sterling offers him a private education, a trust fund, and a life of luxury." He looked at me. "It's a simple choice, Miss Cross. You can watch your son be dragged into the foster system while his parents live in a shelter. Or you can let him go with a billionaire." "A billionaire in jail," Julian reminded him. "Mr. Sterling will be out on appeal by morning," Graves lied. "He has resources you can't imagine." I looked at Leo. He was staring at me. He didn't know who I was. To him, I was just a crazy lady covered in oil. "Who are you?" Leo asked me. "Why does he want me?" I couldn't breathe. I couldn't say it. "I'm your mother." If I said it, I would destroy his world. "I'm an architect," I choked out. "I built the tower." "Miss Cross." Graves stepped closer to me. "Here is the deal. Mr. Sterling wants a meeting, face to face, tomorrow, at the prison. If you agree to his terms, the Bennetts keep their house. Leo stays here. And if I don't, then I execute the foreclosure, tonight, and I file a petition to reveal the identity of the biological mother to the press." He smiled. "Imagine the headline, 'Hero Architect Abandoned Secret Son to Bankrupt Family.'" It was a checkmate. He wasn't just threatening Leo. He was threatening to destroy Leo's perception of his own life. "I'll meet him," I whispered. "No," Elena Julian grabbed my arm. "You can't negotiate with a terrorist." "I have no choice," I said, shaking him off. I looked at Sarah Bennett. "I won't let you lose your home." I turned to Graves. "Get out. Tell Marcus I'll come. But if you touch one hair on this boy's head, I won't use a lawyer. I will burn Rikers Island to the ground." Graves nodded. He closed his briefcase. "Pleasure doing business." He walked past me. As he passed Leo, he patted the boy on the head. Leo flinched. "See you soon, kid," Graves said. He left. The front door clicked shut. The silence in the room was deafening. David Bennett slumped onto the sofa, weeping. Sarah was rocking Leo. "And Leo?" Leo stood up. He walked over to me. He looked at my dirty face. He looked at the oil stains on my dress. "You have eyes like mine," he said softly. My heart stopped. "It's A rare condition, I stammered, backing away. I couldn't be near him. I was toxic. Every time I got close to someone, Marcus destroyed them. Thank you, Leo said, for saving my house. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to tell him that I loved him more than any building, any award, any legacy. But I couldn't. Julian, I said, my voice cracking, but we have to go. Elena. Now. I turned and ran. I ran out of the house, down the driveway, and into the dark street. I collapsed on the pavement by the Aston Martin, sobbing so hard my ribs ached. Julian knelt beside me, pulling me into his arms. He knows, I wept. He knows who I am. He's going to use him. Julian, he's going to use my son as a human shield. Then we take the shield away, Julian said, his voice dark and dangerous. Marcus wants a meeting, fine. We'll give him a meeting, but we aren't going there to negotiate. What are we going to do? Julian looked back at the house where my son lived. We are going to break into Rikers Island, he said, and we are going to finish this. Break in. I wiped my eyes. You can't break into a maximum security prison. We don't have to break in, Julian corrected. You're visiting him. You're the distraction. I'm going to break into the system. To do what? To isolate him, Julian said. Marcus thinks he's running the show from his cell because he has a phone and a network. We are going to cut his tongue out, digitally. I stood up. The grief was fading, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. No, I said. That's not enough. Cutting him off isn't enough. As long as he breathes, he's a threat to Leo. I looked at the moon hanging over the quiet street. I need him to admit it, I said. I need him to admit the blackmail on tape. If I can get him to threaten the boy on a recorded line, the FBI can put him in solitary. Forever. He's too smart for that, Julian warned. He speaks in codes. He's smart, I agreed, opening the car door. But he's also a narcissist, and tomorrow, I'm going to feed his ego until he chokes on it. I looked back at the window where Leo was watching us. Wait for me, Leo, I whispered. Mommy is going to slay the dragon. Rikers Island smells like bleach and despair. It is a scent that sticks to the back of your throat. A chemical cocktail designed to scrub away humanity along with the grime. I sat in the visitor processing center. A gray concrete box filled with weeping mothers and angry girlfriends. I wasn't weeping. I wasn't angry. I was numb. My hands were folded in my lap, resting on the fabric of a modest navy dress I had bought at a gas station an hour ago. My penitent mother costume. Next, a guard barked from behind bulletproof glass. I stepped forward. I placed my ID on the tray, Elena Cross. The guard paused. He looked at the ID, then at me. He recognized the name, the architect, the woman from the news. Special visit, he grunted, sliding the tray back. Warden approved. You get booth 1. No contact, no passing of items. You have 20 minutes. Bye. Thank you, I said softly. I walked through the metal detector. It screamed. Shoes off, the guard ordered. I slipped off the cheap flats. I walked barefoot on the cold linoleum. I felt exposed, stripped of the armor of my high heels and my power suits. But that was the point. I needed Marcus to see me broken. I needed him to believe he had won. Julian, are you there? I whispered, barely moving my lips as I retrieved my shoes. I'm in the system, Julian's voice replied through the microscopic bone conduction earpiece hidden behind my right ear, covered by my hair. I've tapped the visitor phone line. I'm recording everything. But Elena, the firewall here is heavy. If they trace the tap, they'll cut the line before the upload completes. You need to get him to talk fast. I know, I breathed. I walked down the long, echoing corridor known as the Green Mile. Bars slammed shut behind me with a heavy, final clang that vibrated in my chest. I reached booth 1. It was a small cubicle separated by thick, scratched plexiglass. On the other side sat a man in a bright orange jumpsuit. Marcus Sterling. He didn't look broken. He didn't look like a prisoner. He sat with his legs crossed, leaning back as if he were in a boardroom chair, not bolted down steel, His hair was perfectly combed, his face was shaved, even in prison orange. He radiated the arrogance of a king holding court. He smiled when he saw me, a slow, predatory curling of the lips. I sat down, I picked up the heavy black receiver. It felt greasy. Marcus picked up his phone. "You look terrible." "Darling," he said. His voice was tinny through the speaker, but the mockery was crystal clear. "The cheap dress doesn't suit you. It makes you look common." "I want my son," I said. My voice trembled. It wasn't entirely acting. "Ah, yes. The boy." Marcus leaned forward, his breath fogging the glass. "Leo. A strong name. Lion. Though he looks a bit timid. Does he take after his father? The one who ran away?" "Leave him out of this, Marcus. This is between us." "Everything is between us. Elena," he corrected. "But you tried to cut me out. You tried to build a legacy without me. The Skylark Tower, the awards. You thought you could just walk away." "I beat you," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "The tower is standing. You're in here." "I'm in a timeout," Marcus laughed. "Arthur Vane will have my conviction overturned on a technicality in 6 months. The fruit of the poisonous tree. You stole the evidence, Elena. But while I wait, I need a project." "A project?" "I need an heir," Marcus said simply. The air left my lungs. "What?" "I'm sterile. Elena, mumps when I was a child. Didn't I tell you?" He shrugged. "I can't create a legacy of my own blood, so I have to acquire one." He looked at me with eyes that were black holes of empathy. "I saw the boy's test scores. He's a genius, top 1% in mathematics. Just like his mother. He has your mind. Elena, that beautiful, brilliant, chaotic mind that I fell in love with." "You never loved me," I spat. "You loved owning me." "And now I'm going to own him," Marcus continued, ignoring me. "I'm going to take him. I'm going to rename him Leo Sterling. I'm going to send him to the best boarding schools in Switzerland. I'm going to teach him how to build empires. And I'm going to teach him that his biological mother was a weak, frantic woman who abandoned him for a career." "You're sick," I hissed. "You can't just take a child." "I can," Marcus smiled. "Mr. Graves is executing the foreclosure right now. The Bennetts are about to be on the street. No judge will give custody to a homeless couple with bad credit over a billionaire's estate. And since you signed away your rights 10 years ago, you have no standing." He leaned closer, his eyes boring into mine. "I will mold him, Elena. I will turn him into me. And every time you see his face in the news, you won't see your son. You'll see my masterpiece." "Julian," I thought desperately. "Did you get that?" "I got it." Julian's voice crackled in my ear. "But it's not enough. Intent isn't a crime. I need him to admit to the blackmail. I need him to explicitly trade the debt for the boy." I took a deep breath. I had to push him. I had to open the wound. "You can't raise a child." "Marcus," I said, my voice dripping with sudden, cold contempt. "You can't even keep a dog alive. Remember the golden retriever you kicked it because it shed on your rug?" Marcus's smile faltered. "That dog was undisciplined." "And Leo," I challenged. "What happens when he cries? What happens when he fails a test? Will you lock him in a wine cellar too? Will you chain him to a wall?" "I do what is necessary to achieve perfection," Marcus snapped, his voice rising. "You're not a father." I laughed bitterly. "You're a parasite. You steal designs because you can't draw. You steal children because you can't breed. You're empty. Marcus, you're a hollow shell in an orange suit." Marcus slammed his hand against the glass. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the small booth. The guard in the corner looked up but didn't move. "I own you!" Marcus roared, losing his composure. "I own that boy. I bought his life last night. I paid off the Bennett's mortgage. Their car, their pathetic little shop. I hold the paper. Elena, if you don't sign that public statement retracting your accusations, I will ruin that family and drag that boy into this hell with me." "Say it again," I whispered, leaning in. "Tell me exactly what you'll do." I will evict them tonight, Marcus hissed, his face contorted with rage. I will put your son in a shelter unless you drop the charges. That is the deal, his life for my freedom, quid pro quo. Got him, Julian shouted in my ear. Extortion, blackmail, witness tampering, all on federal tape, uploading to the FBI server. Now. I sat back. The fear vanished from my face. I smoothed my skirt. Thank you, Marcus, I said calmly. Marcus blinked. The rage evaporated, replaced by sudden confusion. He looked at my face, the sudden absence of emotion. What? Quid pro quo, I repeated. That's a confession. And since you're already in federal custody, witness tampering carries a mandatory 20-year sentence. No bail, no parole. Marcus looked at the phone in his hand. He looked at the glass. He realized what had happened. You're wearing a wire, he whispered. Better, I said, pointing to the ceiling. I hacked the prison. You didn't just tell me. Marcus, you told the warden, you told the FBI, you told the world. Suddenly, the heavy steel door behind Marcus buzzed. 2 large guards marched in. They weren't the regular correction officers. They were the tactical team. Inmate Sterling, one of them barked. Stand up, hands behind your back. What is this? Marcus stammered. Standing up. I'm meeting with my lawyer. Your visitation privileges are revoked, the guard said, spinning him around and slamming him against the wall. We just received a directive from the Justice Department. You are being transferred to the SHU, solitary confinement, high-risk witness tampering. No, Marcus screamed, struggling as they cuffed him. You can't do this. I am Marcus Sterling. I have rights. He twisted his head to look at me through the glass. His eyes were wide with terror, real terror. The terror of a man who realizes he has lost his voice. Elena, he shrieked. Elena, don't leave me here. I'll cancel the debt. I'll let the boy go. Just make it stop. I stood up. I placed my hand on the glass, right over his face. Goodbye, Marcus, I said softly. Enjoy the silence. They dragged him away. He was kicking and screaming, a tantrum of a spoiled child who had finally been told no. The door slammed shut. I was alone in the booth. It's done, Julian said in my ear. The Bennett's debt has been frozen as proceeds of crime. It can't be collected. The family is safe. Leo is safe. I hung up the phone. I walked out of the visitor center. The sun was shining outside. It was blindingly bright. I walked past the weeping mothers and the angry girlfriends. I walked to the parking lot where the Aston Martin was waiting. Julian was leaning against the hood, holding a tablet. He's in a solitary cell, Julian said, showing me the screen. 6 by 8 feet. No windows. No phone. No contact. He is buried. Elena. I looked at the screen. A grain of pity tried to form in my heart, but I crushed it. He would have done worse to my son. Let's go, I said. Where? To Westchester, I said. I have a mortgage to pay off, legally this time. 2 weeks later. The fall was spectacular. Without Marcus at the helm, and with the revelations of the structural fraud, Sterling Corp collapsed overnight. The stock became worthless. The assets were seized. The Skylark Tower was evacuated for a year of structural reinforcement paid for by the liquidation of Marcus's personal estate. I stood across the street from the elementary school in Westchester. The bell rang. Children poured out in a wave of color and noise. I saw him. Leo. He was wearing a backpack that looked too big for him. He was laughing with a friend. Sarah Bennett was waiting for him by her minivan. She looked tired, but happy. The fear was gone from her eyes. Leo ran to her. She hugged him. I stood behind a large oak tree, watching. I wore sunglasses and a scarf. You could go talk to him, Julian said softly, standing beside me. You saved them. They know it. No, I said, shaking my head. He has a mother. She's the one holding him. He asked about you, Julian said. Sarah told me he asked about the lady with the eyes. I smiled, a bittersweet pang in my chest. Let him wonder. It's better that way. He needs a normal life. Julian, not this, not the drama, not the shadows. And what about you? Julian asked, taking my hand. What does Elena Cross need? I looked at the boy one last time. I memorized the way he laughed. I memorized the way the sun hit his hair. Then I turned away. I need to build something new, I said. Something that doesn't reach for the sky but stands firm on the ground. We could start with dinner, Julian suggested. Somewhere with no wine cellars and no secret microphones. That sounds stable, I agreed. We walked toward the car, but as I opened the door, a courier motorcycle pulled up to the curb. Elena Cross, the rider asked. Yes. Delivery, from the district attorney's office. He handed me a thick envelope. I opened it. It wasn't a subpoena, it was a letter. Ms. Cross, during the seizure of Mr. Sterling's personal safe at the penthouse, we found this. It was addressed to you. It was dated 3 years ago, the day you died. My hands shook as I pulled out a small, handwritten note. It was Marcus's handwriting, but it wasn't jagged or angry. It was shaky. Elena, if you are reading this, I finally went too far. I know I am a monster. I know I broke you. But you need to know one thing. I didn't steal your designs because they were better than mine. I stole them because they were the only thing that made me feel like I had a soul. P.S. The key to the Zurich deposit box is taped to the back of this paper. It contains the original patent for the Skylark dampener. It's in your name. It always was. I'm sorry. I stared at the letter. What is it? Julian asked. I turned the paper over. A small silver key was taped there. A patent worth billions in my name. He had stolen my life, but he had legally shielded my greatest invention. Was it guilt? Or was it the ultimate control freak move ensuring that even in death, he gave me my fortune? I looked back at the prison island in the distance. He left me a tip, I whispered. I crumpled the letter, but I kept the key. Let's go home, Julian. To the penthouse. No, I said, looking at the horizon. Let's find a new site. I have an idea for a foundation.